Hey, May 40 here. We got the pictures of Los Angeles' 71-year-old mayor, Karen Bass. She was at a cocktail party in Ghana as the Pacific Palisades were burning. And I just noticed no support for her from public sentiments, from, you'd think, people who would go to bat for her. So it sure appears like she has participated in a dereliction of duty. And do Republicans want to give a giant pile of relief funding to the same leadership that's been running California and running Los Angeles into the ground? So, troubling scoop from the Los Angeles Times last night is the Los Angeles Fire Department faced extraordinary warnings of life-threatening winds. Top commanders decided not to assign for emergency deployment roughly 1,000 available firefighters and dozens of water-carrying engines in advance of the fire that destroyed much of the Pacific Palisades. Fire officials chose not to order the firefighters to remain on duty for a second shift last Tuesday as the winds were building. That would have doubled the personnel on hand. They staffed just 5 of more than 40 engines that are available to aid in battling wildfires. And we had considerable advance warning about a dangerous situation, red flag warning, extremely rare and dangerous fire conditions. And Karen Bass knew this, and she still chose to leave. As the Pacific Palisades fire exploded in Los Angeles on January 7th, Mayor Karen Bass was posing for photos at an embassy cocktail party in Ghana. And looking back, the mayor was asked, do you wish that you would have done something different? And she has this weird, inappropriate grin, refusing to budge. I'm going to focus on today. I'm going to focus on what we know. Thank you. That's her attitude. Whoops. So here, let's get some more from Jim Garrity. He's been covering this for the National Review. Crisis still ongoing. Maybe we should start looking at the leadership of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Fire Department. So she was partying when the city burned down. But if you want firefighters, cops, emergency services to live in or near a city with high home prices, rent costs, you have to pay them significantly more than the national average. So all sorts of policy decisions exacerbated the devastating Los Angeles fires, and the governor of California, he's been treating this as just a communication issue. If only we had communicated more clearly. Okay, let me get my act together. There's a movie about a Norwegian resistance fighter during World War II. It's called Number 24, and here's a discussion that he has more recently with high school students about the resistance movement.
I've heard that the resistance movement occasionally had to decide upon the lives of other Norwegian men.
No friend-enemy distinction.
Yes.
Have you done it?
Have you experienced war?
No, I have not. But, my parents have.
Then I think that your parents will very likely understand what I'm talking about. And to all of you, I want to say that I hope that you never have to understand it, so long as you live.
So if you're making a friend-enemy distinction within your population, you have all the ingredients of a civil war on your hand. Right, Karen Bass does not enjoy the confidence of many Los Angelinos, our mayor.
Now let's set the timeline. January 4th, the National Weather Service issues a fire weather watch, warning of critical fire conditions due to strong Santa Ana winds and dry brush. On the same day, Mayor Bass travels to Ghana as part of a U.S. delegation to attend the inauguration of the country's new president. January 4th, weather watches upgrade to warnings. January 6th, National Weather Service warns of, quote, particularly dangerous situation end quote, due to extreme fire risk. According to reports, Bass was warned about the Santa Ana winds and was advised to stay in the city for the potential emergency. However, she instead carried on with her plans to travel to Ghana. January 7th, several wildfires erupt, Palisades and the Eaton fires. Also on January 7th, Bass declares a state of emergency. From Ghana, January 8th, 24 hours later, Bass returns to L.A. and surveys the fire damage with Governor Gavin Newsom. January 9th, the numbers. Palisades fire burns over 23,000 acres. Eaton fire burns over 14,000 acres. Now, of all the luck, Mayor Karen Bass out of the country when the disaster hits. That left a void in leadership, just when Angelenos needed it most. So let's dissect her handling of the LA wildfires via communications to understand how even well-intentioned leaders can make critical mistakes in moments of crisis. And more importantly, I'll lay out a roadmap for effective crisis communication.
Video of the mayor, 71 years of age, walking away as reporters shout questions, right? A galling and uncanny parallel to the soon-to-be departed 82-year-old President Joe Biden. So is Karen Bass in some sort of state of weird psychological denial, unable to grapple with the harsh fact that when she chose to gallivant to the other side of the world for an inauguration, the worst disaster in her city's history struck? And in an interview with the New York Times in 2021, she pledged that she would not travel overseas. And this was, I think, her 5th overseas trip. So she pledged that she wouldn't do it as long as she was mayor. Right. The National Weather Service warned of dangerous fire conditions on Friday, January 3rd. But Karen Bass knew about it. We all did. If you live in LA, you got that weather alert in the mayor's office. Despite that, she boarded a plane the following day for Ghana as part of a delegation attending the inauguration of Ghana's president. And she had promised during her mayoral campaign never to leave the country. And it got worse on the return trip. A Sky News reporter happened upon Karen Bass and an aide at the airport, and the reporter asked Bass repeatedly to deliver a message to the city. Karen Bass ignored him on camera for 90 painful seconds in stone-faced silence. The clip is devastating, a campaign ad ready-made, a moment for which she will always be remembered. Right? If it's true she left the country on a Saturday after that warning came out, that is a dereliction of duty. That's Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel, who donated to Karen Bass's 2022 campaign. The owner of the Los Angeles Times also seems to regret the paper's support of Karen Bass.
It's important to remember that when a disaster strikes, clear, honest, empathetic communication isn't just good PR. It can be the difference between chaos and a coordinated, effective response. Now, here's why Bass lost trust with stakeholders during this crisis. Number one was her absence. The international travel during emergency. It reminded me of South Carolina Governor, I'm pulling this from the top of my head, Mark Sanford. I don't know the year, but several years ago, when he was called out, married, Mark Sanford, was called out for going to Argentina. Do you remember that? And it turns out he was with his girlfriend, but he said he was backpacking by himself while his wife stayed at their home on Sullivan's Island in South Carolina with her kids. And she had no idea what was going on. But then everybody found out what was going on. Something else that just popped in my head, it also...
Yeah, she looks completely out of it.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home?
And she runs away from questioning. I can't imagine many people in LA are thrilled to have her as mayor.
Madam Mayor, let me ask you just again, have you anything to say to the citizens today as you return?
No. Ma'am, hold on 1 second.
Painful.
Madam Mayor, just a few words for the citizens today as you return to deal with the catastrophe.
Can you take this down?
David, reminds me, it's probably closer aligned with this, is when the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, was out of town. He was in China, I believe, on a trade mission when a Category 1 hurricane barreled into Texas. Well, it didn't even barrel into Houston. It was a Category 1. The CEO of Centerpoint Energy did a horrible job trying to explain why there wasn't any power in Texas. That crisis for Governor Abbott absolutely coincides. It links with this one. And the difference is Governor Abbott fought back. And that was during a time where he was having a pissing match with President Biden, who was coming off those horrible debates. So it became political. But this is very...
Okay, I want to get a quick burst here from Fox News.
Terrified residents, worried residents can get back in to the destroyed fire zones to check on their homes. Obviously, as the incident commander, Stacey Morgan, told me, that is a very, very tough job indeed. Listen here.
And that's exactly what it is. It's repopulation to be able to see what's left, maybe get some personal items that may not have been destroyed. And for those that do have homes left, to get back in and restore some normalcy to their life, to be able to find the comfort again in knowing that your home has been saved.
And there is a growing controversy over the planning on behalf of those at the top of the city's government and indeed the fire department. Kristen Crowley was asked today, she's the fire chief, about a report in the LA Times about 1,000 firefighters being allowed off shift on Tuesday morning, last Tuesday, when those fire warnings first went into effect. She defended the planning and said, we followed the plan. But a lot of people are going to continue asking the awkward questions, Martha.
Yeah, obviously the early moments of a fire are so crucial, and there are a lot of questions about the equipment and the people that maybe could have been activated at that point and why that didn't happen. Jonathan, thank you very much.
Sure.
So as Jonathan was talking about, we're talking about the LA Times, and they are also reporting this picture, this photo of Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. She's at an embassy cocktail party in Ghana, and they were taken right around the same time that the fires and evacuations were kicking in full force in the Palisades. Her choice to travel to this on this trip as warnings were ramped up days before she decided to go ahead with this trip. So obviously she's getting a lot of criticism. A spokesperson for Bass telling the Times that the mayor, quote, spent most of the party making calls in a separate room. Let's bring in Fox News contributor Steve Hilton. He has lived in California for more than a decade. Steve, it's great to have you with us. Welcome once again. You and I talked about this in a podcast that people can download as well. But I want
Trolled in the chat, Luke Ford is friends with convicted sex offender Donnie Pauling. So I don't know how close a friend I am with Donnie Pauling, but I interviewed him, I think, twice when he was a pornographer, and I've interviewed him several times since he's been a convicted sex offender. So if everyone that I interview on the show is my friend, then fine with me. Donnie Pauling apparently was convicted of having sex with a teenage girl who was under the age of consent. And that doesn't mean that I would never again speak to such a person.
I want to start with you today by playing this soundbite. This is Fire Captain Freddie Escobar, 35-year veteran of the LA Fire Department, so he knows the situation very well, and he's president of United Firefighters of LA City. Watch this.
At that commission meeting, you said, it's dire, someone will die.
It's eerie listening to your words, because that's what occurred. So it's... Let me just take a minute. Sorry. This is a woefully understaffed fire department. We either going to have a fire department that's going to reflect 2025, or we're going to have a fire department that's going to reflect the 1960s.
Steve Hilton, longtime Californian. Welcome, Steve. Your reaction to the captain of the fire department?
Well, Martha, as you know, and we talked about it on The Untold Story yesterday, I've been in Los Angeles for most of the past week. I'm in San Francisco today. But on Monday, I held an event, a press conference, to lay out specific things that we could do to help people now, to help LA recover and rebuild, and to make sure anything on this scale doesn't happen again. With me was a retired Los Angeles firefighter. And the reason I asked for a retired firefighter was that I thought a retired person would be able to speak more freely than someone who's in the department now. And the fact that and he said exactly the same that we've just heard there and more. But the fact you've got someone in the department right now saying these things just tells you the level of rage throughout the department at the leadership. Going back to what Jonathan was reporting there, and he said that the fire chief said that she was happy with the plan in terms of letting those people go off shift. She didn't exactly say that. She said their plan, their plan, as if it's nothing to do with her. She's the chief, just like Mayor Karen Bass, yucking it up in Ghana. I mean, that is really the symbol of the incompetence and mismanagement and dereliction of duty that we've seen throughout this situation.
I don't know how she survives this, but we'll see. I only have a couple seconds, so I just need a quick response on the other side. But Kamala Harris has, voiced an interest in being governor of California. You voiced an interest as well. Here she is with her message to the Los Angeles area from the White House. Watch this, and then quick thought on the other side, if you would, for us, Steve.
It's critically important that, to the extent you can find anything that gives you an ability to be patient in this extremely dangerous and
yeah, the politics of joy. That's what we need. Let's pour the politics of joy onto these fires.
Unprecedented crisis that you do.
Pretty much a lifelong Californian, Steve.
Be patient, she's telling people.
Yeah.
In the face of all of this, she is totally out of her depth on it. She is not qualified to be vice president. She wasn't qualified to be president. She is certainly not qualified to be governor of California, and that's not going to happen because we need really big change in California.
So Los Angeles has about the fewest firefighters per residents of any major city aside from San Diego. So here's CNN was talking about this. LA firefighters
when you
were
shop
sounding
bombs
alarms.
at low prices,
oh, come on, man.
Hat.
They're bloody popping an ad on me here. But next to San Diego, I think LA has the fewest firefighters compared to any other major city, and all sorts of people were sounding an alarm about that shortfall. So when you give mental space, when you give funding to DEI and all sorts of nonsense programs, that takes away from doing your job.
At that commission meeting, you said it's dire. Someone will die.
It's eerie listening to your words because that's what occurred. So let me just take a minute. Sorry.
Fire Captain Freddy Escobar.
You're not supposed to make me cry.
35-year veteran of the Los Angeles Fire Department wishes he'd been wrong, and this had not happened. For years, the LAFD union president warned that a disaster like the Palisades fire could happen. And while the cataclysmic weather conditions were historic, Escobar also blames something predictable that hurt the firefight: money.
This is a woefully understaffed fire department. We either going to have a fire department that's going to reflect 2025, or we're going to have a fire department that's going to reflect the 1960s.
A CNN analysis shows out of the 10 biggest cities in the nation, Los Angeles ranks 9th when it comes to the number of firefighters per resident. And it shows millions of dollars in rescue equipment is just sitting in a lot, unused, because the fire department can't afford to hire the mechanics to repair it. LA's fire chief said in a recent memo the fire department's staffing levels were half the size of what they should be.
If we cut one position, if we close one station, if we close one resource, the residents of Los Angeles are going to pay the ultimate sacrifice, and someone will die.
Just last month, fire personnel packed an LA Fire Commission meeting, begging the city to rethink the budget.
These cuts came at exactly the wrong time, with calls for services at an all-time high and our firefighters at their breaking point.
We are straining our department's resources beyond the brink, and we cannot continue on this path.
City Councilwoman Tracy Park was there too.
There are large swaths of the city with no emergency response resources available.
Are we going to be having the same conversation next year and the year after?
We can't. We can't. I think that people are rightly upset, not only that this happened, but there is a sense that we as local leaders needed to do more for them. I feel like I let them down. And I've been screaming about it from the day I came in. And so I think there is an obligation of us to not let this be for nothing. I think this has to be the wake-up call.
LA Mayor Karen Bass said at a recent press conference that the budget didn't have an impact on the firefight here in the Pacific Palisades, mainly because of the unprecedented nature of these fires. Now, there has since been a city council meeting. Mayor Bass, as well as members of the city council, according to the fire union, appear to be much more on board about increased funding for the fire department.
Yeah, I'd hope so. So, recruitment, all right? If you're from a favored group, then it's a lot easier to be given an interview, get recruited into the Los Angeles Fire Department. So Adam Carolla talked about having to wait 7 years, right, before he had an opportunity even to take a test to apply to be a part of the Los Angeles Fire Department. When he was waiting in line, then he started talking to a woman who and he asked her, how long did you have to wait? And it was like 3 days. So prior to this fire, I didn't fully quite grasp how much people hated LA and how much people look forward to LA sliding off into the ocean or just burning up. And Steve Saylor talks about this in his column today, and he wrote it Monday night, so January 13th. And he says, the coming annihilation of Los Angeles has been a persistently popular topic over the past century. And I was just dimly aware of it, but I didn't really think so much about this until now. There was a left-wing activist, Mike Davis, who published a bestseller in LA in 1998, Ecology of Fear, Los Angeles and the Imagination of Disaster. And so when I was writing skeptically about the pornography industry in 1998, 1999, I was called like the Mike Davis of the porn industry. So the destruction of LA has been a central theme or dominating image in more than 150 novels, short stories, and films. And these fictional causes of LA's demise include fire, earthquake, flood, nuclear bombardment, comet strike, and invading hordes of creatures, whether human, animal, or alien. So some of this is supplied side. The movie industry is centered here, so LA is the most convenient city to blow up. We have many science fiction writers here who are attracted by the military-industrial complex, but much of this is demand-driven. Lots of people enjoy thinking about the complete annihilation of Los Angeles. I read this terrific 1939 novel by Nathaniel West, The Day of the Locust, and you've got this sensitive Ivy League painter, who comes to LA to make money, and at the end of the movie, there's an overexcited throng at a movie premiere, white people rioting, and they carry out his theme of burning down Los Angeles. So Nathaniel Weinstein, a.k.a. Nathaniel West, is a classic example of the indignant, indigent man of letters lured to Los Angeles to write for the film industry. And the crass self-expression of the inhabitants drove him crazy. And so many educated people have so much contempt for L.A. Like he thought only dynamite would be of any use against the Mexican ranch houses, Samoan huts, Mediterranean villas, Egyptian and Japanese temples, Swiss chalets, Tudor cottages, and every possible combination of these styles that line the slopes of the Hollywood Hills Canyon. I've just never been able to be outraged about this variety of architectural styles. But I didn't realize how much people hated LA. And we had a sunset fire that broke out last Wednesday right next to the popular Runyon Canyon hiking trail that came quite close to cleaning up the architectural diversity deplored by Nathaniel West. And the wind blew it straight towards Hollywood Boulevard, just like his novel, The Day of the Locusts. So many people who are not in Los Angeles enjoy visualizing LA's demise. So if you live in a frigid part of the country, it must be pleasant to imagine the lotus eaters of LA getting what's coming to them. Now, the prosaic reality is LA isn't likely to be left a ruin anytime soon unless we get the big earthquake, which would end life as we know it in LA, right? You get a sufficiently sized earthquake rumbling through here, and Southern California would be unlivable for months, if not years. So only a small fraction of 1% of homes in LA have been destroyed by fire. Good news is that once the firefighters got in place, they did incredible work. So they were able to protect Brentwood and Encino. They have helicopters lining up, filling water from the Encino Reservoir, dropping it every 30 seconds all night on Friday night. They managed to save all but 2 homes in the Mandeville Canyon just west of the 405. And so when their forces built up, they've done an incredible job at limiting the damage. Bad news is firefighting aircraft cannot operate when winds are at their worst, which is exactly when wildfires are at their most dangerous. So the great majority of homes that burned last week burned while airplanes and helicopters were grounded due to the high winds. So we probably need a huge investment in infrastructure to fight fires on the ground. So we saw Friday night and Saturday morning incredible efforts to keep the Palisades fire out of the San Fernando Valley. So the flames roared up the south side of the crest of the Santa Monica Mountains, but then they slowed down once they started having to advance downhill into the valley. So heat rises, fires tend to move much more quickly going uphill. The firefighters made their stand on the downslope. They saved the Getty major art museum. And by that time, we had hundreds of firefighters. But we never know when the next fire will break out. LA is home to 10 million people over 4,000 square miles. So Steve Saylor suggests, why don't we line many of our fire roads on these canyons with sprinkler pipelines that will automatically release water under certain conditions? California was hugely effectual at building infrastructure, such as vast water projects and college campuses from 1885 until 1969. And then there was a 180-degree turn, and we haven't been able to really build much since 1969.
Very similar when Bass was out of town. And unlike Abbott fighting back to deflect from the fact she was out of town, Mayor Bass froze in the moment of her crisis. Now, it is worth noting that Bass did declare a state of emergency from Ghana, but the optics of her being away were terrible. Her return was met with anger and calls for her resignation. And Bass did what leaders often do, defended her actions. She claimed that she had been in constant contact with officials, that she had taken, quote, the fastest route back, end quote, to Los Angeles. But the damage was clearly done. Now, I'm going to play the video that put the mayor deep, deep into a crisis.
There. Have you nothing? Apology for them?
What are you doing? I don't know. Hold on. Redo. Here's your jacket to put on when you come off the flight. Like, she knew she was going to be photographed. You would have to know the questions were going to be there as well. Now, one of the reasons why she likely was silenced is because since this crisis happened, and this is what happens in a crisis, people start digging. There was a 2021 interview with the New York Times that resurfaced in which she said, quote, if I win the election, not only would I, of course, live here, but I also would not travel internationally. The only places I would go would be D.C., Sacramento, San Francisco, and New York. in relation to LA, end quote. And the trip to Ghana, that was her 5th international trip, her 5th. She clearly wasn't expecting the ambush on the jet bridge, but how could you not? With all the criticism mounting on Bass from the trip to Ghana, things went from bad to worse. Now, typically in a crisis, leaders will already have some fault lines that will contribute to the erosion of trust. For Bass, in 2024, she had slashed the LA Fire Department's, LAFD's budget by $17.5 million. So, of course, critics come out and they started arguing that these cuts hampered the city's fire response. And then people on social media chime in with their public opinion. Critics at the time warned that the city would not be able to afford these types of contracts because they would make 4 significant budget cuts to basic services like the fire department. So the timing of the budget cuts added to that erosion. Number 3, the credibility is clearly in question. The criticism has started. She's on the trip. She's gone back on her word. The policies contributed to the chaos of the lack of water in the fire hydrants to fight the blazes. Naturally, online, people are going to speculate and they're going to say it's the decision that she cut the LAFD's funds. So now Bass is in a position where she has to defend these reductions. Now, does it mean she made a mistake in these reductions? Well, that's up for the people in Los Angeles to determine. However, leaders are allowed to make their decisions, even if they're unpopular decisions. You just have to specify why it was made. Sometimes decisions are tough decisions. That's the type of language that leaders should put out there when they are dealing with this type of issue in the throes of a crisis. Also, the luck, she had someone who was directly contradicting her and was a member of her team, and that is the LAFD chief, Kristen Crowley. She was not afraid to go on camera and speak about what the cuts did.
Did the city of Los Angeles fail you and your department and our city? It's my job to stand up as a chief and exactly say, justifiably, what the fire department needs to operate to meet the demands of the community. Did they fail you? That is our job, and I tell you, that's why I'm here. So let's get us what we need so our firefighters can do their jobs. Did they fail you? Yes.
Ouch. When you have your fire chief directly contradicting you, that is creating a firestorm within the firestorm. That was bold leadership on the fire chief's part to do that. Put her job at great risk. This is the point the critics come out, and the critics are vocal. They're talking to reporters. They're on social media. The criticism mixes with public opinion. And where do we get public opinion? Of course, on social media. Then you get celebrities chiming in, like a Kardashian, of course. Khloe says on Instagram, quote, "I stand by you, Chief Crowley," 4 bangers. "Mayor Bass, you are a joke," 4 bangers. That type of criticism, it doesn't matter if it's from a Kardashian, that type of criticism, starting with the letter K, matters because the Kardashians have followers. The press is going to pull any type of commentary by celebrities. It just adds to the criticism, and it erodes the trust. With the erosion in trust comes the retaliation. That's when people, the public, they start to stand up and they demand justice. At the time, there was an online petition. At the time of this recording, there are over 134,000 names calling for the resignation of the mayor. I often get asked in these situations, do these petitions work? Well, boards don't determine to fire leaders, and people don't get fired directly because of a petition. My goodness, could you imagine if that would be the reason? However, it's a metric that the press can use and put in their stories. It's a scientific measurement. If there are over 134,000 verified names, now we have verified evidence that at least 134,000 people want this woman gone. Next, broken promises, broken leadership. The criticism of the mayor and her response to the wildfires continued to grow. The broken promise of stating she was not going to travel. The potential broken promises with the LA Fire Department that the chief was calling her out for. Broken promises in leadership also can be a death knell to leadership. Next, it's deflecting responsibility. Instead,
look, this is the greatest loss from the LA fires. All right. Priceless works of art have been destroyed. All right. 200 artworks by Hunter Biden worth millions of dollars were destroyed in these fires. I mean, it's hard to go on living knowing the extent of our loss.
Instead of acknowledging the public's concerns about her absence or the impact of her budget cuts.
Can you address the criticism now over the budget issue and the slashing, $17 million?
I think if you go back and look at the reductions that were made, there were no reductions that were made that would have impacted the situation that we were dealing with over the last couple of days. And then there was a little bit of confusion because money was allocated to be distributed later on, which was actually going to support salaries and other parts of the fire department that were distributed a little later.
In defense of Mayor Bass and anyone else standing before a press conference, I used to do press conference training for officials when I was at FEMA. It's important to have optics match your words because people watch press conferences. They don't necessarily just listen to them. They watch them while listening to them. So if your words are discordant with the optics, people are going to defer to the optics. So if I'm going to speak about her fault lines, I have to speak about why she is at a disadvantage right out the gate. Next, number 6, a lack of empathy. Her initial statements lack the emotional resonance needed to connect with a community reeling from a disaster. Her emphasis on resisting efforts to pull us apart and being more focused on political unity than acknowledging the real pain and loss faced by Angelenos, people in the area, that lack of empathy can also erode trust. So now let's focus on the key lessons in crisis communication. What could Bass have done differently? These are the key takeaways for anyone in a position of leadership when a crisis hits. Number 1, show executive presence. Females, people identifying as females, minority, anyone who's not an experienced white male behind a microphone has a disadvantage. Even if people were going to blame her and still come at her for doing it, she needs to go on the record and explain why. Instead, she was a deer in headlights. That is going to follow her straight into the election. She prioritized the protection of her name over the reasons why she chose to go to Ghana during the middle of growing crisis. 3, be present. Literally impossible. That means be on the ground, be visible, be engaged. So she's already broken a promise by traveling out of town, but she's going to a presidential inauguration. Let's say that's already out in the press and people are already talking. She could use that as a talking point. I was at the airport heading out. That's true. I was heading out for an inauguration. But then I was keeping up to date on the potential of a crisis, and I pulled back and we came back to the city.
Okay, this is a PR professional with some sharp analysis, not just about Karen Bass, but about these sort of situations and how to navigate them. All right, there is one bloke in Israel who seems particularly clued in. He seems to be close to the Bibi Netanyahu regime, and he has consistently predicted what's coming down the pike better than anyone else. And he was just on Fox News. So I don't have a strong opinion yet on this hostage deal reached between Israel and Hamas. So I'm more curious what this guy has to say than anyone else that I can think of in Israel.
This deal will hold.
Well, I think it's the beginning. We'll have to wait and see. Hamas will try to do different tricks and try to trick Israel in one way or another.
So for the past 14 months, this guy has been way ahead of the curve telling us what's coming down the pike in Israel's 7-front war.
Israelis are very worried about Hamas getting stronger, about the well-being of the hostages, about what will be the next phase after 33 hostages will return. And we must stick to our goals of war. We must win decisively against Hamas, eradicate them eventually, bring back all the hostages, and create a new reality in Gaza.
Obviously, that is a big question at this hour. What will happen with the hostages and what these phases really look like?
So we know we're talking about an initial deal of 33 hostages that will be released in the next month and a half. But this is out of almost 100 hostages. And the big question is, what will happen with the other hostages that are not released in this deal? It's not clear. And it's going to be negotiated. And I think that both Israel and the upcoming administration will have to put a lot of pressure on Hamas, on Qatar, on Egypt, to really make sure that all the hostages, 100% of the hostages, are returned to Israel.
Obviously, General, that is the most important thing at this point, getting those hostages home. What can you tell us about what was happening behind the scenes, what is still happening behind the scenes with these negotiations? There are many who are saying, well, President Biden said earlier that this is the deal he laid out a long time ago, and that it is just now happening, okay? He said this is the blueprint that he laid out for a deal, and now it is happening. But what changed? Why is it happening now?
So this deal has been on the table since May last year, and Hamas opposed it completely. Why? There was no real pressure on Hamas. Israel wanted to stop some of the humanitarian aid, especially the gasoline, but the administration wouldn't let us do that. So Israel had no major leverage on them. What changed is two things. One, Israel defeated Hezbollah. Hezbollah cannot support anymore Hamas. Also Syria fell. Iran is weaker. But the big change is President Trump's threat. Once President Trump threatened them that if they don't release hostages, there will be hell, they had to assess from the beginning the situation, and I think they understand that if they don't get a deal now, the chances of getting a good deal for them will be very, very low, if at all. And therefore, they made their own assessment, and they are inclined to do the deal, thinking that they'll maximize what they can get now and not wait to see what hell means.
Amir Avivi, we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so Paul Town was on Mark Halperin's show this morning, and he was reacting to the hysterical attacks on Pete Hegseth by female Democratic senators yesterday. And let's play a little bit here from Paul Town this morning. Here we go.
Thanks.
Let's go to Paul. Paul, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please. Got unmute. There you
go. Am I on?
Yes, sir. You're on.
Well, I'm a New Yorker who lives in France. And,
okay.
I'm addicted to two-way because I'm learning a lot about a lot of things. But what I want to say right now is that after watching two-way last night, I watched some of the Hegseth hearings, as much as I could stand. And I don't want to come across in the wrong way, but I was really shocked by the Democratic women particularly. And it made me worry about the future of women in politics.
Okay, that's just such an enormous, absurd leap that certain women perform badly, and therefore you worry about the future of women in politics. I think you'd have to have been poisoned by listening to too much dissident right material to think that there's an immediate connection between some women here perform poorly and then you start worrying about the future of women in politics.
A lot of things that we've seen. And that could be a disaster, particularly the issues that they were dealing with. You know, this women in combat thing.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt you briefly. I'm going to bring Sandra in because she, I think, has the same point of view. So I just want to add her to the conversation. But you keep going, Paul, and then she'll chime in.
Well, so I'm just curious if anyone was as.
Can you just say a little bit more of how you characterize what you saw and why it concerned you?
Well, it seems like it's so deeply ideological, so unhinged from any reality or even how other people might see them, that one can't say, you know, how can these people be in government? And the thought that came to me was, you know, something's going to happen. You know, they're setting up Trump to be a dictator. They announced that he's a dictator, and they're kind of pushing him into that in a way. And,
Paul,
and
can you give me an example? Like, I'm just trying to understand, was it the questions that they asked, the subjects, and anything in particular that you think really exemplifies what you're talking about?
Well, the attitude, the aggressiveness, and the hammering, you know, trying to just being fixated on trying to, you know, get Hegseth to admit that he was a hypocrite about women.
Look, I cannot stand the idea of Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. I think there's no indication that he is qualified for such a position. And it's not because he's been a heavy drinker. It's not because he's cheated on his wives, right? where's the substance in this discussion? There's just simply no indication that Pete Hegseth is equipped to run such an enormous bureaucracy. And as for his drinking, right, to the extent he has a drinking problem, that's just the symptom, right? For him, heavy drinking has been the solution to whatever level of anxiety he feels that has resulted in his inability to maintain relationships and to simply deal with life. So it's not a good sign if he's been so heavily dependent on alcohol. And abstaining from alcohol is not going to fix it, because the alcohol was medicating a deep inability to navigate life without this chemical enhancement. So I see no indication that he will be a good Secretary of Defense. I just wish the hearings would focus on matters of substance.
Women. And it was so centered. It seemed like deranged feminism to such an extent that it alarmed me.
And Paul, you didn't see the same thing in the male Democratic senators?
Well, I didn't like that, but I didn't see them as being quite so. I could get that. One thing I'm learning from two-way is you guys are insiders.
The female senator from Hawaii, Mazie, is particularly unimpressive.
So I'm learning a lot of things about how politics works, how Washington works, that I never knew before. And that kind of softens my reaction to these things, because you explain how, this is how the game works and so on. But still, I don't like it. I've never liked it.
Yeah.
But
Sandra, let's Sandra. Sandra, what are your thoughts on what Paul's saying and on the hearing?
Yeah, I agree about the aggressiveness. And I know in other hearings, this grandstanding occurs, but I think the Democrats, and especially women, have not learned a damn thing about why Trump won. And as a lifelong Democrat, I am so disappointed. And I've toyed with the idea of becoming an independent, but I just did it. I went online and I am now changing to an independent. And Dan, I wish you were the strategist for this administration, because when will they learn? Why didn't they read Mark's first book? Why aren't they learning? I can't understand it. And if one, I had to shut it off. I didn't even see all of the women. I did hear who was it, Kane, that ran with Hillary.
Yeah, and the drinking.
And he was awful too. I thought, what the hell? And we didn't get to any content Sean, do you really think Hegseth is a qualified candidate? Please tell me the truth.
Absolutely. Look, the bottom line is you got somebody who's got dirt on their boots, who's served in combat.
As I agree. As a retired nurse, I always wanted them up on top to come down to the actual working. But as far as an administrator, now will the deputy help him? Is there somebody that's experienced with the Pentagon, for the minutia, not minutia, but the stuff that he maybe doesn't have? Who's going to help? Who knows what the hell they're doing? That's what I want to know.
I would just say this. When you can't pass an audit for 8 years in a row, I'm not sure that speaks volumes to the current pool of folks.
Right.
And that obviously extends on a bipartisan basis. There are a lot of people, especially at DOD and in the Pentagon in particular. And by the way, the one thing that makes DOD in particular unique is that you've got this combination of uniformed and civilian leadership that is really a unique aspect of that one department in our government. And so I do think that the deputy in a by statute has to be, I think, an accountant, or there's some other aspects of that the deputy SecDef has that allow that to be the case. And I think, frankly, you're going to see that throughout the Trump administration, where the secretary
Yes.
or the leader of a department or agency is going to be one person, and then the deputy is going to be sort of your COO or your XO, depending on your mentality and how you look at things. But that's, I also, I mean, like I said, I look at a lot of this and say, okay, well, let's look at the people that we've had run DOD on a bipartisan basis the last several, and you go, maybe it is time we look at things differently, and that we're preparing for the threats, and that we get somebody who thinks about the budget and make sure that the priorities are straight. I mean, like I said, I took to heart yesterday Tim Sheehy's question, the new senator from Montana, former Navy SEAL. I mean, shipbuilding doesn't happen in a day. We are not
ready
to take on the threats. And so again, having somebody that says, yeah, I get it. I know what it takes. I understand that when pilots can't get the hours, that the planes are going down in a way that, from a future standpoint, that we don't have the munitions, the ammunition. I mean, I'd rather have somebody from a warfighting standpoint that says, look, the job of the DOD is to make sure that we are ready to defend and protect the homeland. And so, I think it's time that we got somebody in there that understands the focus.
Well, I didn't vote for Trump. I don't like him, but I don't want us to fail. I do not want that. And I want our country to flourish. And that's really what I'm concerned about.
Good message there.
And so Halperin did a good breakdown of Pete Hegseth's hearing yesterday afternoon.
The conventional wisdom, which I believe in this case is true, is that Democrats did not, quote unquote, lay a glove on him. Okay? Now, I am a longtime student of congressional hearings. The performance of the side that's trying to do something, that's trying to change the dynamic, that can be the minority party sometimes, it can be the majority party. It normally is horrendous. It's a very strange thing because members of Congress, some of them are not that bright, but in the main, they're not stupid people. And it's pretty clear you don't need to be a genius to sort of understand the metrics of success. And yet, with very few exceptions, in the higher the profile of the hearing, the worse job the politicians do. It's just nuts how bad they are. And you saw that in the Benghazi hearing that the Republicans did with Hillary Clinton. You saw it in the Biden impeachment hearings. But Democrats, too. They're just not that good. Back early in my career, there were 2 Democratic members of Congress who were studs at hearings. They understood, a lot of it's performance, but it's also substantive. It's also war gaming out. What is the witness going to say? How do you get the press to react to what you do? There's an art to it. But again, it's not that hard. It really isn't. And yet, time after time, they fail. And so I was texting with Sean and Dan all day about the hearings, and they were very down on the Democrats' performance. They both thought the Democrats did horribly. The reality is, I feel quite confident saying this, they did quite well compared to the norm. In terms of having a strategy and executing it, I'll talk about that in a second, they did quite well. But they didn't do nearly good enough to do what they needed to do. The metric of success was to get the press coverage to say, Hegseth was rattled, he's defensive on a range of issues, because again, there's a dozen things they went after. And to have some of the Republicans who have doubts about Hegseth to say, whoa, like this guy was not prepared to deal with this, there's clearly issues here. This morning, that he could go down because there are doubts about him, and I know that, and again, I hear that from his own people. But his chances now being confirmed are quite high, and the vote could happen sooner than Monday, which is, I believe, when it was originally scheduled. But there are still possible that there are 4 Republican senators, despite Hegseth's strong performance today, who might vote no. So the conventional Republicans are doing a victory lap. It's done. Not only is Hegseth going to get confirmed, but on this momentum, the momentum of this, everybody's going to get confirmed. That's what is going on in American politics today, and somebody needs to study it in a rigorous way. This group of folks who communicate with each other, with the Team Trump.
All right, he's talking about the MAGA world online.
With allies on the Hill, with interest groups. This is a remarkable force. And it's one of the things Trump didn't have last time. He had a version of it, but not like this. And part of it is they're so influential. At least people have talked about it in the context of old media versus new media, and how Joe Rogan has a bigger audience than the Today Show, all of that. But this group of folks is relentless. When they want to do something, they gear up and they do it. And they wanted to save Pete Hegseth, and they did. And then finally, for whatever reason, there have not been new revelations. You've not met a significant new revelation about Pete Hegseth or Bobby Kennedy or Tulsi Gabbard or Governor Noem or Kash Patel. So without new stuff, and this is right out of the Bill Clinton playbook. Anything that's been brought up before, these are old stories. These have already been talked about. The Democrats are bringing up old things. So those things have combined to put Hegseth in a very good place. I said this earlier. The effort they made to calm the horses, the Joni Ernsts of the world, to say, stop expressing public doubt about Hegseth, give him a hearing, let him get to a hearing. They all deserve raises because they got him a hearing. And then today, this will be studied. This should be studied too. He was great. He did not get rattled. He knew how to answer tough questions without producing sound bites. And again, I've not heard too many people talk about this, but you want to be responsive enough so your failure to be responsive is not a story, although he failed to respond to a lot of questions. But you want to answer in a way that doesn't produce a sound bite. So, did you rob the Wells Fargo bank? You don't want to say, I did not rob the Wells Fargo bank. You don't want that sound bite. You want to say, Senator, they faced a lot of false allegations.
So looking at John Kirby right now speaking on Fox News, the White House National Security Communications Advisor, he is consistently the single most effective communicator for the Biden administration, along with the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, who is reportedly considering switching over to the Republican Party.
Allegations, right? That's what you want to say. So he was very well prepared, and they're not doing a victory lap on that fully yet, but I think you'll eventually hear about how they prepared him. The flaw in the Democrats, they basically said every member is going to ask about a different thing because there's so many things they want to talk about. The personal allegations against him, the sexual assault, drinking, management, allegations of mismanagement of the organizations he ran, questions about the fact that he's never had more than 100 employees. Now he's going to have 3 million, all this stuff, right? And we'll run through some clips of that. The problem for the Democrats is they never made him look like he wasn't answering the question aggressively. They never made him seem rattled. And they packed the room. They packed the room with his supporters. And when he came back in, the guy's got a great bladder. He peed once, I think, the whole day, maybe twice. But when he came back in from the first break, they broke into a cheer like he was, he was like, Willis Reed coming out at the end of at the beginning of the second half. They just went crazy for him. So they had the room packed. And so when there were gladiatorial moments between him and the Democratic senators, and he got off a good line, there was laughter for him or cheers. So that really helps in the theatrics of what's going on in the room. And the Democrats, again, you'll see it. They had lines of attack. We know the guy has a lot of vulnerabilities, but he stayed relentlessly on message, just again and again talking about the troops. They never pinned him down. So he's flip-flopped a lot of positions, a la Kamala Harris 2024, right? He used to be against women serving in combat, now he's for it. He used to be against gays in the military, now he's for it, right? And so they never pinned him down to say, I mean, they tried. They said, which is the truth? What caused this conversion? Never pinned him down, okay? So I'm going to show you the most significant thing of the day first. The only exchange between Pete Hegseth and the senators, which is the Republican. Joni Ernst is really the only Republican on the committee who has expressed a lot of questions about him. And once she went and did her...
And she's now out and saying she's supporting Pete Hegseth.
And multiple Democrats asked for multiple rounds, and they never got them. And the chairman just said, nope, this is the way we're doing it. So he's going to be confirmed, almost certainly it appears it's going to be confirmed by the committee. And then the question is, does he lose 4 Republicans on the floor? And we'll talk here in a bit about how that's still possible. But let me show you some of the exchanges he had with Democrats. The first one is probably the most controversial of the day, and I'm just going to show you 30 seconds of it. This went on for quite some time. Tim Kaine, senator from Virginia, honed in on the reality that that regarding the events around the incident in the hotel in California where he was accused of sexual assault and then settled. The circumstances of that is at the time of the event where he says he had consensual sex with the woman, he had just had a relationship with his third wife, and was getting divorced from his second wife. So watch the exchange, and then I'll talk a bit about it on the back end. Number 4, please.
Completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is that a complete clear?
Senator, the child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges. It was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And
he never engaged on the essence of what Kaine was talking about. Kaine was saying, at the time this occurred, you had, by your own account, you had consensual sex with a woman, having had a child out of wedlock with your third wife, who you were now cheating on with this woman, having cheated on your second wife with your third wife. Okay, he never engaged on it. One, he just got to say what he did. He played the card of his 7-year-old daughter and said she's a human being, and he just said I was cleared of the allegations of sexual assault. True. He just went to those places. The Kaine exchange was extremely personal, and you don't see that very often. And rather than, and Kaine just wasn't very skillful doing it. So he came off as being, for the Republican ears and for some independent ears, came off as very, very personal and intrusive. Okay? Now, Elizabeth Warren's concern. Hegseth has said, and in the abstract, if you're sitting in the room wargaming it out, we're gonna do damage to him in the hearing. Elizabeth Warren said, well, he's come out as a kind of a populist thing to say generals shouldn't be able to leave active duty and go lobby for the defense industry, right? That's something that's got bipartisan populist appeal. And so she was very clever, thinking, well, this guy's going to want to make back all the money he's losing giving up his Fox contract. So when he leaves the Secretary of Defense job, he's going to want to go be a lobbyist to the defense industry. So here's number 5, Elizabeth Warren trying to pin him down on that.
In other words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. You're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals?
Right? So her big clever thing was she was right. She was smart. He doesn't want to rule out going to cash in after he's defense secretary. She's right. It's no better to do it as defense secretary. In fact, in some ways worse than to do it as a general. But he doesn't want to take it up the table, but then he makes a joke. I'm not a general because the room is packed with his supporters. They laugh on cue. He doesn't lose the exchange, even though there's merit to what she said. But she loses the exchange because he answered in a clever way and he had the audience. All right, another heated exchange. Number 6, Tammy Duckworth, senator from Illinois. And you'll see her very aggressively questioning him, but he stays calm and she kind of loses her cool. And again, this is just hearings 101. Trying to rattle the witness and getting rattled yourself is usually not a winning formula. Number 6, please.
Have you led an audit of any organization? Yes or no? I don't want a long answer. Yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes or no, did you lead an audit? Yes or no? What are you afraid of? You can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every part of my leadership of these organizations has been misrepresented.
I will take that as a no. What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters.
Okay, so no Republican senator is going to say, I'm going to vote against Hegseth because of that. In fact, just the opposite. And another thing he did that's from Witness 101 is they have limited time. So if they try clever things, like just say yes or no, or, I only want you to focus on this one area, he doesn't have to do that. And he can eat up a lot of their time by giving long, slow answers that are semi-on point, but aren't really responsive. And they can either interrupt him, or they can sit there and let him chew up a lot of their time. Again, he was very well prepared. Didn't get rattled. Didn't filibuster so obviously that they could call him on it. And they're just desperate watching the clock thinking, I got to interrupt him. All right. One more, which is Mark Kelly of Arizona, number 7, please.
You say you've had personal issues in your past, yet when asked about those very issues, you blame an anonymous smear campaign, even when many of these claims are not anonymous. Which is it? Have you overcome personal issues, or are you the target of a smear campaign? It can't be both. It's clear to me that you're not being honest with us or the American people because you know the truth would disqualify you from getting the job. And just as concerning as each of these specific disqualifying accusations are, what concerns me just as much is the idea of having a Secretary of Defense who is not transparent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my...
So again, the Democrats sitting around said correctly, just as Elizabeth Warren was correct. Sometimes, in face of some of these allegations, he says this is a negative smear campaign, anonymous smear campaign. And sometimes he says, I turned my life around with the help of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, and my wife, okay? It can be both, because he'll use both situationally, depending on which he needs. And Mark Kelly went through a bunch of accusations. I think another senator did too. You were drunk at this party, you did this, you did that. Do you deny it? And he would say that was a false smear or a negative smear. I forget what she said. It's very Clinton-esque. You don't deny it, because maybe someone comes forward with compelling evidence. You just say it was a smear, because in some ways, even if it's true, it's a smear. He did great. He really did. And I'll just say finally, number 9, please. Senator Curtis of Utah. Okay, he replaced Mitt Romney. He's a bit of a wild card on many of the Trump nominees, and he spoke this morning during the hearings at an event Politico did. And he said regarding Tulsi Gabbard and Hegseth that he's still undecided. He says, you see there in the second paragraph, Curtis separately said he remained undecided about Pete Hegseth's nomination, saying he was closely monitoring the hearing and the background check. Okay?
Let's move on. So a couple of funny clips. This is American instructions to their troops in England in 1943.
Goodbye. It's been very nice meeting you both.
Glad to have met you, I'm sure.
Funny you should come from Birmingham, too, isn't it? Have you come to my Birmingham?
About the lack of
home
racism.
and have a cup of tea with me, both of you.
Thank you, we will.
Goodbye and good luck.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Now, look, men, you heard that conversation. That's not unusual here. It's the sort of thing that happens quite a lot.
So it was a white woman thanking to black American servicemen.
Now, let's be frank about it. There are colored soldiers as well as white here, and there are less social restrictions in this country. Just what you heard, an English woman asking a colored boy to tea. She was polite about it, and he was polite about it. Now, look, that might not happen at home, but the point is, we're not at home.
Goodbye. It's been very
So the American Armed Forces had to release training videos that the English weren't as racist. Because at that time in World War II, there were very few black people in England to get racist over. So our professional choices have a tremendous influence on us. And I worked for a few years in landscaping, so whenever I look at a garden, I automatically check out how's the water going to drain. And for other people, you can get a good bead on them when you recognize what was their early professional choice. So for me, it was journalism, but for other people like John Podhoretz and Noah Rothman and Richard Spencer, their early professional choice was the theater.
Or Finian's Rainbow. I can't remember which, but they're both horrible. Anyway, whereas Everything's Up to Date in Kansas City is, of course, Oklahoma, which is the landmark breakthrough show. Now we're just off in the ether, Noah and I being theater.
So you would expect people who are theater kids and who had theatrical ambitions to be really good at bringing the drama.
Theater kids, like old theater kids, like dreaming of the days in which we were trotting the boards in our high school.
It's like Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo over here.
But they got to do it as adults. You see, that's the no wonder they're so happy. I've never had happier moments than when I was a theater kid. Anyway, to go from the delightfully pointless to the extraordinarily impactful, let's say, word is that the hostage deal has been struck, that Hamas has agreed to the terms of the deal that is before Israel and Hamas in the world. And if you listen to our podcast yesterday.
Another little quick excerpt here.
And that moment passed. And that's why he's not going down, because the moment passed. Well, but there was legitimately
talking about the Pete Hegseth nomination here.
Moment where, we were thinking like, all right, people are floating names.
Yeah.
By the end of this week, we will probably have to discuss the qualifications of those names in.
And then what happened? What happened? Once again, the media did it to the jujitsu of the left did it to themselves. What saved Hegseth? The interview with his mother, where somebody released the email from his mother saying, I really hate the way you're treating your wife. You're disgusting. How dare you? And then his mother came out and said, I was very upset. An hour later, I apologized to him. And why? How did you get my email? And right then, just like the Trump raid, just like this happens, they go too far. They push the wrong button. They think they've got the coup de grace, or they've got the dagger that's going to take out Caesar. And it has exactly the opposite effect. Every Republican in the Senate who wasn't already was like, okay, that's it. They'll say anything and do anything.
I don't think that's it. I don't
really?
think that's
Okay.
it. I think the timeline you have is wrong. I think that happened after an organic pressure campaign emerged on the right, which equated Pete Hegseth with Brett Kavanaugh, and Everybody's office was flooded with calls. Everybody's Twitters was filled with attacks. Everybody was threatened with primary campaigns from people very close to Donald Trump with his ear. And they caved. And that, a confrontation
Republicans
caved. And that confrontation with their own cowardice manifests down the line. They're not going to kill Pete Hegseth. They've bowed to that pressure. Okay. But they resent the degree to which they were pushed into it. And you'll see that resentment manifest elsewhere.
Okay, I'm not denying your account of this, but I'm saying that whatever heart was still in it, in other words, like, well, Joni Ernst and Susan Collins aren't going to be swayed by this. They have their own independent standing, and Joni, you can't primary Joni Ernst, a 17-year veteran, if she says, I'm sorry, but as a 17-year veteran, I can't countenance this guy being my commit. If he were the guy who was running the Pentagon when I was there, I would be very upset.
Are you telling me that prolific tweeter with millions of followers captured who proposed sending Carrie Lake to move to Iowa to primary Joni Ernst? You're telling me that was all fantasy? That was never going to happen?
No, it may happen, and no, you may be right. But I think the two work together, and I brought this up for a reason, which is that the politics of the last 2 months have been just horrible for Democrats and liberals. Like, it's crazy how badly things are going for them. I mean, it's not like they were blown out in this election. Harris lost by 1.5 points. The House, basically, the Republicans are hanging on.
The GOP lost seats.
GOP lost seats in the House. Granted,
seats.
gained seats in the Senate, but it lost seats in the House. It's not like 1980 when they were blown out of the water. Reagan won 40 states and 12 Republicans won Senate election. Republicans took the Senate for the first time in a billion years with a 55-45 majority, winning 12 seats. Like, that was.
Okay, let's give Greg Gutfeld from last night a shot here. What do you got for us, Greg?
Yes. All of that is entirely appropriate. Happy Tuesday, everyone. So former Fox and Friends weekend host Pete Hegseth faced some tough questions during today's confirmation hearings. Meanwhile, another Fox and Friends host spent the morning removing a paper jam from the Xerox machine. During the hearing, Tim Kaine grilled Hegseth over cheating. Because if there's one thing Tim hates, it's men who cheat on their wives. I hope he got the HPV vaccine before he did that. I don't even know what that is. Kid Rock is scheduled to perform at Donald Trump's inaugural celebration. Because of the occasion's historical importance, he'll be wearing his formal wife beater.
Slingshot.
Starbucks customers will now have to buy something in order to use the bathroom, especially if they're leaving a grande. Climate warrior Leo DiCaprio has fled L.A. on a private jet as the fires continue to rage. He was seen leaving his house with his most prized possessions, Brittany and Amber. In defending his fire response, Governor Newsom sent people to a DNC fundraising site. He also defended his homeless policy with a coupon for tents. Oh. An OnlyFans sex worker claims she was with over 1,000 men in 12 hours, breaking the previous record set by the Lincoln Tunnel. Oh. I know. Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg ordered the removal of tampons from men's bathrooms at Meta. Tim Waltz said this means war. which means he then ran away. Kevin O'Leary claimed Donald Trump shot a 68 at Mar-a-Lago, with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson replying, "Big deal, we shoot that many over a holiday weekend." Ex-WNBA player Liz Cambage is now on OnlyFans and makes 10 times as much as she did as a pro athlete. Call me curious, but I wonder if she's kept her ball handling skills. What? I don't get it. All right. Starting January 20th, we're about to see a radical change. Let's call it the return of common sense. It's quite a departure from a woke intern signing pardons for a chief executive who can't remember if he's giving a eulogy or climbing into the box. We're actually going to have decisions designed for the real world. America first instead of America sucks. Yes, with Trump imminent, common sense is on the march. Start with the glut of companies who've now rolled back their DEI policies. McDonald's, Walmart, John Deere, Harley-Davidson, Lowe's, Meta. So that giant sucking sound you hear? No, it's not Kamala on a job interview. What? Wait. She's not good at job interviews.
Come on, I'm trying to run a show here.
Weird. That sound is thousands of DEI consultants, woke content checkers, and HR quota cops polishing up their resumes and seeing their plans for a lake house go up in smoke, or rather down the drain. Either way. That's the true Trump effect, a wave of practical thinking that's driving the elites insane. Take Starbucks, for instance. They just announced that if you want to use their restrooms, you got to buy something other than time. In other words, if you want to take a dump and then shoot up, do that where you're supposed to, on the subway. Now, you can't walk 10 feet in America without bumping into a Starbucks. These joints have become like America's public square. So this policy shift is a tell. It's like a blood test whose results give you the American mood. And that mood is enough of this indulgent, childish detour the nation has taken and back to the hard reality of things that actually work for society's benefit. You'll even see it in Trump's foreign policy. Take Greenland. Trump would like to. He's not alone. This week, House GOP members introduced a bill that would authorize Trump to negotiate with Denmark to acquire Greenland. And the Danish government are reportedly open to discuss boosting U.S. military presence there. Hell, one poll found a majority of Greenlanders approving to become part of the U.S. Here's a few of them right now. They're an adorable people. And no surprise, the elites here and overseas are melting down, which must mean, again, it makes sense. These people get a rash on their ass every time they're faced with reason and logic. For some people, it's the size of Greenland. So why focus on Greenland, on Canada, on the Panamac anal?
Okay, let's move on from that. Let's tackle some more highbrow commentary. What do we have here? This woman, lovely woman, she makes $400,000 as a diversity officer for the Los Angeles Fire Department.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or, you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire. Which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire. You want to see
and Greg into the conversation.
Well,
Greg?
I want to just point out some good news that California is finally dropping retardants on the fire. So far, they've dropped Adam Schiff, Karen Bass, Kamala Harris, and Gavin. Retardants. That's what I said. By the way, the Democrats attach strings to everything. It's called DEI. It's called identity politics. Every single act that requires competence has strings attached. That's why you have this disaster. And it raises one key question. Where is the heroic leader? Yeah. Every massive disaster, you actually have somebody that steps up. 9/11 is a perfect example. But in this case, there's no action figure because their focus was always on words and feelings and public virtue, not protecting citizens. But you've seen this in every facet of life. Crime, immigration, natural disasters. They come up empty because all they have is social justice, sanctuary cities, and platitudes. But they don't know how to help you. In terms of real problems, massive, massive problems, identity politics and social justice don't clear brush, don't fill reservoirs, do not save lives. Instead, it's an opportunity cost because it costs billions that goes to issues that drain resources. That is an opportunity cost. You mentioned the thing about fighting Trump's immigration proposals. That's an opportunity cost. And it's incentivized a leadership to indulge in this karaoke of caring. So even when your home burns down, an illegal with a blowtorch is released because he's simply an undocumented welder.
Very.
Okay, that's pretty good.
The Veep offering some word salads of comfort to the state's wildfire victims while urging them to be patient during the crisis.
There is still so much work that firefighters, police officers, FEMA, and others are doing that is about search and rescue. It's critically important that to the extent you can find anything that gives you an ability to be patient in this extremely dangerous and unprecedented crisis that you do.
Sore loser Kamala has blown off years of tradition, declining to invite J.D. Vance and his family for a courtesy visit to the VP's residence before they move in. This is profoundly asinine. I mean, she said some really stupid things, but telling people whose homes burned down to be patient. Going back to what I said in the B block, no leader has stepped up.
Yeah.
She wants to run for governor of California.
Yeah, so there's no time like the present. Like she always fails to take an opportunity, like on the immigration czar, for example. But in this case, she could have said, "Joe, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Put me in, coach. I have got to figure out a way," and go there and say, "Gavin, what do you need? Karen, shut up. I got something over here." Like an organized.
New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and Los Angeles are all disaster zones in different ways. You could have had reservoirs filled. You could have had underground power lines. That was there for a while. Brush removal, more firemen. I would love to have more millions in the fire department. But no, you spent billions on homeless. You spent billions on illegals because that was the virtue signal. Newsom's argument that this is being politicized by Trump is a sham because Trump had said all these things before this happened. He is a builder. So was Rick Caruso, a builder. This is what they talked about. They didn't see Democrats. They saw incompetence. Why else would Trump point it out? He's not interested in helping Democrats. He just wants the thing fixed. That's how he is. Clear the brush. Cut down the trees. A similar fire like this took place 8 years ago, and they learned nothing. They focused on the virtue signaling instead. Billions in aid for things that make you feel good but do nothing. That left California vulnerable. If there's one thing you got to teach kids before they turn into Democrats, it's a basic economic term called opportunity cost. If you shunt billions towards effort A, effort B doesn't get it, especially in a finite pie. You can't always rely on the rich to keep enlarging the pie. The real blind spot for Democrats with DEI, it's not that the fire chief isn't qualified. It's that the fire chief has to make that metric a priority, splitting your attention, taking your attention away from public safety to public virtue. The fire chief could actually hate DEI, but the demand is an institutional directive. The directive doesn't create profits in a company or results in a public company, which is fine if you're Coke or you're Pepsi. If you got billions of dollars, of course, DEI could be a little hobby. It's a PR hobby. You throw the money out there, you get good PR. Bud thought it was doing that. However, and I blame the companies, billion-dollar companies for this, you embrace DEI because you could afford to. They couldn't. A lot of companies, smaller companies and public entities, they don't sell Coke. They save lives. So It wasn't a hobby for them. It ended up being a death sentence.
Okay,
Jack
good
it.
points
Thank
there.
you. I know you're lying.
Yeah, good points there from Greg Gutfeld. And let's get a little bit of Greg on Joe Biden stepping down.
Presidency a long time ago. The big guy's leaving town with just a 36% approval rating. And this morning, he gave himself props and a goodbye letter, claiming that the country's stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. He also said that it was the, quote, privilege of my life to serve this nation. Good thing he's checking his privilege before he leaves. Today was also the last day for the notorious KJP, who turned on the waterworks for her final briefing.
And finally, I do want to say thank you to President Biden and First Lady Dr. Biden for this incredible opportunity. As I said earlier, standing at this podium behind this lectern, serving the American people and this administration has been an honor of a lifetime. And I will be forever grateful to the President for his trust and this amazing opportunity.
All right. Meanwhile, the guy who turned Biden brown-nosing and into an Olympic event, Joe Scarborough, says, F you, he was justified in defending Joe's broken brain.
Was he slower physically? Yes. Did he occasionally jumble a few words or a few names? Yes. But he corrected those as well. So after 2.5, 3 hours of it with him in the White House, going all over the White House, I did not see that.
Maybe, but I mean, foreign leaders and foreign governments told me very different things to what you've just said.
Did he occasionally jumble some words? No, he.
And so that foreign policy analyst for the America correspondent of the Financial Times was the person speaking back to Joe Scarborough. And in a column in 2023, he said the biggest difference between the mainstream media and the right-wing media is that the right-wing media talk about Joe Biden being senile and the mainstream media essentially ignore the story. Should I really care that LA is on fire? No. If I see no reason why anyone who not in LA or doesn't feel connected to people in LA should care. It's just foreign to me having a passionate hatred for the place. I just don't have experience with just passionately hating some place. Now, I grew up in Northern California, and just hating LA was kind of a way of life in Northern California for about a third of the population. I'm just wondering if LA is not directly affecting you, then why would one passionately hate it? Right? I'm just wondering if that's adaptive or if it just feels good because it bugs you for some reason. All right, I want to get a little bit more here from John Podhoretz and company.
It was a blowout. This was not a blowout.
But I think it's different when it comes to Trump. I think a Trump victory and a Trump popular vote victory is its own kind of paradigmatic blowout.
And they're also getting, the sort of what our friend Ala Pundit used to call the day of recriminations after GOP losses, right, where there would be the finger pointing. And the Democrats are getting that from their own side in a way that I don't think that they, in 2016, I felt like the Democrats were a bit more united in that they were cheated or it was, whatever, Russia.
The Russians.
So when you go to San Francisco sporting events against Los Angeles teams, you'll often hear the chant, LA sucks, LA sucks. How come there's not the equivalent in LA? There's no widespread chanting of San Francisco sucks. I encounter zero animosity towards Northern California. In Southern California, I encounter zero attitude of, oh, it's better here. San Francisco, Northern California are inferior to it. There's just no chip on the shoulder of Los Angelinos of which I'm aware. I don't hear them condemning New York or Chicago or Denver or Seattle or we're clearly better than those other places. There's just no chauvinism in that regard that I notice in LA. And I think a little bit that LA is a little bit like Jews. So when Jews mistreat a Palestinian, that might be front page news around the world. But if one Palestinian slaughters hundreds of other Palestinians, nobody cares. If Arabs slaughter thousands of other Arabs, nobody cares. But if one Jew mistreats one Arab, one Palestinian, then that's big news. So we have natural disasters occurring all around the world. Why do LA's natural disasters get so much attention? Because Los Angeles takes up so much room in the popular imagination, because people feel more intensely either pro or negative about LA, just like people tend to feel more intensely about Jews, either pro-Jews, negative Jews. There just seems to be an intensity level in the reaction to Jews and to Los Angeles, possibly to New York.
Russia had installed their president, whatever. Everybody was out in the streets, and we just got to fight the fascists and blah, blah, blah. But now the discourse among Democrats is, man, you guys in the campaign offices, right, and the higher reaches, you guys don't know what you're doing, and you don't know how to talk to normal people who think that, you're like some robotic, walking woke computer or something like that says things like, come on, Latinx. And, there's a real, within the Democrats, there's a real, stop. You guys got to cut it out because it's different now. And that, I think, is fueling a Democratic feeling of having gotten blown out, even though they didn't get blown out. There's just this, man, this was a disaster.
But the fact remains that the party, there are all sorts of facts, right? Patrick Ruffini now surfacing the fact that there are now more people who identify as Republicans than.
Remember, the 2022 midterm election was supposedly a disaster for Republicans, but Republicans got something like 3% more of the vote than Democrats. One of the things that I miss about the old days is that there was more freedom to talk about group differences. Here is a training video from 1954.
The secret of selling to the Negro is expressed in one word. That word is recognition. Now, there's nothing unusual about that. People want to be recognized. They need recognition. That's basic in all of us. But perhaps because he's had so little of it, the Negro needs even more. He needs to feel important and appreciated. This need is a very real and important one. It shows up even in many of the Negro's shopping habits. Anyone who sells or wants to sell to the Negro customer should know about some of these habits. 3 habits in particular play a big part in every sales transaction. To begin with, most Negroes buy by brand. They ask for products by name. They're quick to turn down off-brands. You see, for a long time, the Negro has been sold a lot of shoddy, second-class merchandise. So now he asks for name brands in order to make sure he gets his money's worth. Buying by brand, that's the first important Negro buying habit. Now for the second. The Negro buys good quality merchandise. Symbols of quality and prestige are very important to the Negro customer. This woman, for example, is buying fine crystalware. But she is also buying the admiration and approval of her friends and relatives. It's a well-known fact that many Negro customers are influenced by the opinions of others. What their friends may think of a certain item often decides whether or not the sale is made. So remember, the Negro buys quality merchandise. That's the second important point. And here's the third thing to remember when selling to a Negro customer. When he specifically asks for one thing, don't try to sell him something else. Don't try to switch him at the point of sale. If you do, he'll probably react something like this.
Doesn't he think I've got the money to pay for it?
There's a reason for this reaction. Again, because he's had experience with cheap merchandise, the Negro resents being offered a substitute. He wants to be sold on quality, not price. The Negro buys by brand, he buys quality, and he doesn't like to be switched at point of sale. These are the keys to selling the Negro customer. Another point. The Negro family does things together, as a group. The family works as a unit. It lives as a unit, and it buys as a unit. When you sell to one member, you many times sell to all. It's also true that many places of entertainment are still closed to the Negro. So he spends more of his money for the things that are available to him, often for items that are considered luxuries.
The successful salesmen who do a good job of selling in Negro communities. How do you go about getting the order?
How do I get the order? Well, to tell you the truth, I don't do anything. Anything different, that is. I've been calling on these accounts long enough to know that the Negro just wants to be treated like everybody else. No matter who you're calling on, a little friendliness and courtesy help a lot. But naturally, anybody resents being patronized or talked down to. So I usually call a man Mr. Brown, Mr. Smith, or Mr. whatever his name is, until he tells me to call him by his first name. And of course, I always stick to business. I stay away from talk about race or religion or politics. That goes for talk about Negro celebrities, too. You know, this business about what good prize fighters and singers the Negroes are.
That's the secret of selling the Negro.
Okay, so that was far more respectful than I expected, and shouldn't it just be commonplace to observe that there are different tips and different tricks to be useful and successful and productive dealing with different groups who often have different gifts and different priorities, right? We're not all the same. So respectful discussion of the proclivities and sensitivities of different groups seems like a good thing to me.
As Democrats for the first time in almost a century and all of that, that's very real. I'm just saying that the actual number of combatants on the ground, who votes for one party versus who votes for another party, did not change very much, and the Republicans are not marching into Washington, you know, triumphantly like the Romans coming back from Gaul. That is not what is happening. It is not what happened. What happened is that in their response to the election, they have proved to have feet of clay every bit as bad as the feet of clay they showed running up into the election. By which I mean, aside from the general question of who's going to run the DNC and is it good that the Kamala Harris team that tweeted is going to be at the DNC tweeting, or is that crazy or whatever, it is Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom with the fires. It is Eric Adams in New York and Kathy Hochul with the subways and the subway disorder. It is Brandon Johnson in Chicago and the schools people in Chicago. Democrats who are actually doing governance in the United States in very high profile places, in very high profile ways, are at the worst possible moment showing incompetence, commitment to these ideas that Americans are increasingly discomfited with, like, yeah, it's really important that we have DEI running our fire departments and things like that, as the entire business class in the United States is running in the other direction.
Okay, well, here's the thing about
Costco.
that. Yeah.
I read today in the Wall Street Journal that Costco is not giving up on DEI. So I'm going to Sam's Club. I've had it, or BJ. I am not doing Costco.
Yeah, Costco is the only major corporation that is quite happy to tell you they're not backing down on their commitment to affirmative action. All right, John Podhoretz has a powerful recommendation here.
Quickly make a recommendation, then we can go. I've been watching this quite astonishing show on Netflix. I've watched 4 of 6 episodes. It's called American Primeval. And it's about the Mountain Meadows Massacre and the aftermath in Utah in 1857, when a wagon train was beset and 120 people were killed by what it was assumed were Native Americans, members of the Shoshone tribe. And that was the report. It turned out over time that it was a weird, paranoid, lunatic thing that Mormon settlers in Utah had done, fearing for complicated reasons, and that they had staged it to look like the Shoshone had done it when they hired Paiute Indians to help them, and that they also did it, but they were wearing hoods on their heads. Anyway, this is a fictionalized account of this massacre and the aftermath of it. It is, imagine, I was just telling a friend, it's like it should be called Fear the Walking Deadwood. Imagine Deadwood, but it is so violent and so like denuded of color that it is almost like a zombie, it's like a historical account as a horror film. Just about it, the sheer unbelievable brutality of the life that these wagon trainers and these settlers and the Mormons who were being chased across the country by the military and the army, and the Native American tribes themselves, who were incredibly brutal toward settlers and toward each other. And it is as graphic as you can imagine. So if you can't take violence, do not watch this thing. But it is gripping. It is stunningly acted, and it is like it is like Deadwood a little bit, like 1883, the Taylor Sheridan prequel series to Yellowstone, and like some other stuff. This kind of like, you know what? Enough with the sugarcoating of the experience in the Old West. This was as bad could get. Like this is what happens when you live in a world without law. That's really what it's about. There are no laws. There are no settlements. The United States does not have control of this territory. Nobody has rights. Nobody has anything. And so it is like Hobbes. It's like watching the world before the Leviathan, as Hobbes would describe it. It
sounds like a little bit like it's part of Cormac McCarthy's world, Blood Meridian or something.
Exactly. It's it is the best. That's a brilliant analogy. It is like the best rendition of Cormac McCarthy that Cormac McCarthy didn't write. Right. Although it doesn't have about it. It's not like there is a looming evil. That's the one difference, because McCarthy's books are always dominated by a sense that the world is like controlled by evil. This is just chaos. And when you live in chaos and lawlessness, then anything can happen at any time to anybody. Anyway, it's very powerful on Netflix, American Primeval. All 6 episodes are available for your viewing. So we will be back tomorrow.
Yeah, great show. I love American Primeval. It seems to embody my worldview. So let me run through some of the highlights. So it begins Utah Territory, 1857. First episode called Wild and Untamed. The United States Army, Mormon militia, Native Americans, and pioneers are all locked in a brutal war for survival. Caught in the bloody crossfire for every man, woman, and child who dare to enter this territory, this American primeval. So one of the useful models that I have for understanding the world is that we're all locked in an iron cage together. And no one's coming to rescue us. And so you want to be defended, you want to be strong, you want to make useful alliances, and to recognize that you can't escape the cage. So this is 10 minutes into the first episode. Where
this is us. Crook Springs. In between, you got the Wasatch Mountain Range. As rocky and hard and high as any you'll ever come across. And which this time of year is going to be all but impassable. But you're likely to never get to it due to what's roaming on all sides. If the outlaws don't murder you, you got your Utes, Bayou, Shoshone, Grizzlies, Wolves, riled up Mormons.
Our kingdom of God holds strong. It will cleanse and purify the world from wickedness.
All right, that's Brigham Young preaching there, the Mormon leader.
Bear Claw.
Just so hard to pull your attention away. I just started watching the show through for a second time, and very rarely does it drag on me. There are a couple of little bits where I thought, okay, I don't need to see this again. But the rest of it still seems compelling and exciting, even watching it for a second time in 5 days.
Suited you? You just added your stock?
Talking here about these Mormons are trying to purchase some dry goods, and they're met with some skeptical inquiries about how many wives they all get to have.
Sister Alvin's not betrothed to anyone at the moment.
How much for her?
So you could claim her as your own if it suited you and just add her to your stock? God bless you.
I'll wait for you outside, Jacob.
Right. If a bunch of people are insulting you and you're not in a good position to put them down, then God bless you is an excellent response. Now, Blood Meridian, it reads to me like the Bible. It's not a fun read, right? American Primeval is fun. What's going on with this affirmative action nonsense, Luke? I thought companies were forced to do affirmative action by government law. Not necessarily. There are government laws, of course, that touch on these areas, but government laws are enforced by people, and the people who will be enforcing government law will be under the direction of the Trump administration. So under Donald Trump, right, it becomes much more perilous to engage in DEI. There seem to be more liabilities than benefits, while under a Biden and a Democratic regime, there seem to be more liabilities than benefits to not engage in DEI.
12 a pop.
I did not appreciate your tone back there.
So the lead female character, she just seems to be wrong about everything. Have you ever had a woman in your life who was just consistently wrong about everything, and perhaps you're inextricably tied to her? Someone who perhaps just got bad taste, bad judgment. All right, male or female, anyone like that in your life is just consistently wrong? My God, what a millstone they are around your neck. And I've gotten into these intense romantic relationships, but then they felt so good, but I came to see this woman was so flawed. Her judgment was so bad. She was even worse at reading social cues than me, that she would be a millstone around my neck until I got out from underneath the lure of her crazy sexuality. So you've got a woman and her young son trying to make their way through a very difficult time. And now in this scene, this young Indian woman, young Indian girl, she stole a knife because she's tired of being raped by her drunk Indian father. And the wife says, look, come to me, but he's not interested. He wants to go for the girl. And the girl is tired, so she stole a knife, and she won't put up with being raped anymore.
Sir?
But if you're sick of being raped, no one's going to protect you. It might be up to you to protect yourself. So all the pleas and all the beautiful worlds in the world won't necessarily stop an angry, brutish man set on raping you. But she has a knife at hand, and she's tired of being raped, so she fights back. Right. The strong take what they want, the weak endure what they must. That's the way the world works. We're all locked in an iron cage together. The strong take what they want, and the weak endure what they must. So it sucks to be weak.
We a long way from Philly.
I know where I am, sir. I picked up the bounty outside St. Louis. She was seen there looking for a guy west. Word is she hooked up with a man named Fry.
Don't believe I've seen her, but I'll be on the lookout. They give a reason she murdered that feller?
You can always find the right reason to kill somebody, I suppose. Good day.
Yeah, you hear a woman murdered her husband, but how many people would ask, "Oh, was there a reason?" Because typically women are not violent, right? Men carry out 10 times as much violence as women.
You possess a permit to be on these lands?
Permit?
By proclamation of Governor Brigham Young, no person shall be allowed to pass through this territory without a permit provided by a proper officer. If you don't have a permit, you and your party need to turn your wagons back east before nightfall. You're not going to keep on through
Friend,
here.
you can assure Governor Young that we're going to be out of here first light. He'll never knew we were here.
Well, I'm afraid it don't work like that.
Governor Young has declared martial law to protect his people due to you and your kind driving us out of our homes, killing our loved ones, telling us to find our own place to be.
Right, so it's the Mormon militia who's warning this group of settlers that they need to turn around or they're in danger here because Governor Brigham Young in Utah has said you need a permit to traverse Utah. And this group of settlers, they're about 70 men, so probably about 120 all told. They feel quite secure in their own strength, and they would have been better off shooting and killing these 5 members of the Mormon militia rather than becoming sitting ducks for a deadly organized attack.
Found that place. Mister, you're standing on it.
As I understand it, I'm standing on land owned by the United States government. I do not need permission.
So who does land belong to? Right, those who can enforce their rule over it. Right, if you can enforce your rule over a particular piece of land, that is your land.
Nation of Governor Brigham Young, no man shall be...
You keep talking about your proclamation. I do hear you. I'm not dead.
So it doesn't really matter who's logically or legally in the right here. What matters is who can fight and defend themselves and take away threats.
Only problem is that we have our own proclamation, and that proclamation says that we take orders from no man, especially a goddamn Mormon, or that thing there, whatever that is. So you can tell, friend, you want to start shooting, I got 60 guns back here, ready to go. And I got some real fine shots in the lot. And he's real bored, he ain't been shooting nothing but, what you been shooting, Cole?
Field mice.
Field mice. So you tell your governor, no thank you, on his permit. What I would appreciate is some grazing spot for my cattle.
So it turns out to be quite a bad decision that these settlers make in defying the Mormon militia, who happen to be highly effective killers. And they are highly effective killers because they recruited a bunch of Native Americans to their cause.
If your governor's feeling generous, ask him if he might be able to spare a couple of them wives he's got.
The younger the better.
Right, bad idea to taunt people who have guns. Right, bad idea to taunt people who have the ability to hurt you.
Better.
Younger the better. Now what I'd suggest is you all ride out of here before we shoot you up. Go, now.
God took Eden from us, and...
So this young Mormon man was set to marry a Mormon woman called Eden, but she died, and so he married her sister.
Delivered my Abish to me just in time for this journey.
You look almost as sickly as I feel, Abish. Something to tell us?
Sorry. Can't help but feel like I don't belong.
So Abish is not totally on board with the whole Mormon life.
Should be Eden here, not me.
That wasn't God's plan.
Perhaps God made a mistake.
We must trust the path God laid out for us, whether we understand it or not.
Like a blind man being led by the hand of a stranger. Until he reaches the cliffs. And on his way down, he realizes he wasn't blind at all.
So faith is often a beautiful thing, but sometimes faith could be an absolute disaster. Some people become better when they add a bit of faith to their life, and other people become much worse and much less effective at navigating reality. So the Mormon militia wipe out the settlers with just a few female exceptions who are being handed over to the Indians.
I don't know if we should stop. They'll still be...
So the lead female in this story, who's on the run for killing her husband, like almost all of her advice, almost all of her opinions is bad. And just imagine being saddled to someone who's got such a horrible track record. I mean, she almost gets everybody killed.
Be looking for us. Who are those men? The men with the masks.
Those weren't all Indians.
Yeah, they're part of a Mormon
Oh,
militia.
no. Can we build a fire?
Yeah,
Only
you
if you
build a
want to
fire.
live through the night.
Right.
Can we have some of your food?
Okay, those are just some highlights from episode 1. Let's skip over to the highlights from episode 2. Just couldn't stop watching this thing. So this Mormon guy survives being scalped, and a bunch of Indians come his way.
You took
and he's
my wife.
asking for help. He gets on his knees and he's begging and he's praying, asking for help. He's just barely survived. He's barely survived someone skinning his scalp, and the Indian leader just says, "Let him live, so that he can remember what invading our lands cost him." Right? You invade somebody's land, that may very well be an incredible price to pay. This is Brother Brigham Young, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 1857, Utah. He's the governor of Utah.
It is an ignorant excitement that causes some people of the United States to feel and act toward us the way they do. But trust me, brothers, there is not an honest man among them who, if he could hear our doctrine taught without knowing it was Mormon, would not drink down
Okay,
those
let's bring
principles
Kip
like a
back
thirsty
to the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
So, with patches on my breeches, holes in both my shoes, and my coat of many colors, I hurried off to school just to find the others laughing and making fun of me and that coat of many colors my mama had made for me. Luke,
Oh,
they
that's
couldn't.
beautiful.
Luke, they couldn't understand it, 'cause I thought I was rich. So I told them of the love my mama sewed in every stitch. And then I told them all the stories my mama told me why she sewed. Then I told them why that coat was worth more than all their clothes. But Luke, they didn't understand it, so I tried to make them see. One is only poor, only if they choose to be. It's true, we had no money, but I was rich as I could be in that coat of many colors my mama'd made just for me. Anybody ever made something just for you, Luke?
Probably.
Probably. You were kind of, I know you had your mom taken from you when you was just a little bear, but, you know, back in the day, moms used to make toboggans and scarves and things like that. So I was hoping somewhere along the way, some of those fake mamas might have done something for you along the way. Did they? Maybe once or twice?
Yeah, they would like make my lunch every day.
Yeah. Well, you got
Make
the
dinner.
feeling then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Dolly was talking about there. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, I can't hardly see here. Oh, I know. Rumor has it that those little dudes you was talking about, you know, the Mormons in the white shirt and the tie that go proselytizing all over the country on their bicycles. Rumor has it they can probably field strip an M16 right down to the firing pin blindfolded by about the age of 10. What do you think, Luke?
I don't know.
That would be if they could, that would be a wolf in sheep's clothing if you've ever seen one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, they've got a low rate of criminal violence, so you don't exactly fear for your life walking through Mormons.
Well, you was telling us about the 1850s Mormons, so I just kind of, my mind started playing with what if they had some abilities like those, what if the 2020s Mormons had abilities like the 1850s Mormons with firearms? They would truly be a force to behold, wouldn't they? a G-rated mafia, if you will.
Well, they've got a state. They sanctified state. So Seventh-day Adventists, they sanctified time. They took the seventh-day Sabbath as something that they would make holy. The Mormons made the state of Utah holy. So it's quite a distinctive location. They dominate that state, and they have they've created a community best suited for their own thriving. And I love it there. I think it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know all about the Mormons, but weren't they sort of run out of like New York and Illinois and Missouri, and they just sort of, that's finally the place where everybody left them the hell alone, sort of?
Yes. So they had quite a bloody history, and there are still controversial elements to the Mormons, but overall quite a peaceful people today. They're probably about the most honest in business after Anglicans, after WASPs of any group of which I'm aware.
Yeah, I still pull my muckers up a little bit when I hear that Joseph Smith golden plate story, as you probably do too, right, Mr. Ford?
No, it doesn't seem to me any sillier than any other religious story.
10-4. I was going to ask you about those LA Dems. It's like they've devised the perfect beast here. Climate change is caused by everything, and it causes everything. That's like that's some pretty good circular logic, isn't it, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to put down beliefs with which you do not agree, but when you read the work of very intelligent scientists who've devoted themselves to this topic, it's about 100 to 1 on the side of those who believe that people play a significant role in the change of the climate. So there's a lot of smart people on their side. They're not idiots.
Mm-hmm. Climate change is like the one-stop shop to define evil and blame said evil for all of our problems.
How many books have you read on climate change by people who propound it? But it's easy to put down things that you don't know anything about. How many books have you read on climate change?
I don't know, Luke, but you know, are we going to blame humans for all for the problems of the Mesozoic era and the Jurassic era and all the other periods where it all came crashing down? Are we going to blame?
Well, obviously no one does that. I mean, you're just making something up. So if you want to dismiss climate change, then the human caused climate change, then one would need a very strong intellectual basis. I don't talk about it because I don't know much, but I don't think if you optimize for truth, you can't engage in those kind of petty put downs.
Well, but you see
except just as an emotional exclamation. Yeah.
Every time somebody from James Watson to Charles Murray, every time they optimize for truth, they get canceled and all their grant money gets taken. You know what time it is, Luke, don't you?
Oh, so therefore, because there are some truths for which there is a significant price to pay if you publicly pronounce them, therefore there's no utility to the concept of optimizing for truth. No, there are some truths that are very expensive to articulate, but there are many other truths that are not expensive to articulate. And I don't want anyone to needlessly ruin their life. You don't give up on telling the truth just because you use excellent judgment in not articulating certain truths in certain contexts.
Mm-hmm. If I really wanted to, honestly tell you, what do I think the worst thing humans have done to the climate? Maybe there will be some price to be paid for all that atomic bomb testing that we did, from the 50s on.
Yeah, there's a huge price to pay. I mean, that like permanently changed certain things in the atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, don't they, didn't that have a permanent effect on things like carbon dating and stuff like that? So it's measurable. Whatever's been going on there is measurable. But that ain't blaming you and me for commuting back and forth to work in a car. You get what I'm saying? And the people who put this stuff out, they themselves many times, it's kind of like Gavin when he goes off to the dirty laundry or wherever he went to eat. They're saying one thing and then they're flying a private jet doing things that they're telling everybody else not to do. So
Well, everyone's
So
a
I don't know.
hypocrite. You cannot believe in anything without becoming a hypocrite. So only those who believe in something can become a hypocrite. So people who are, what's that called when you don't believe in anything? A nihilist, right? And only a nihilist is protected from being a hypocrite. As soon as you believe in anything, you'll inevitably become hypocritical because nobody lives up to their highest ideals all the time. So that doesn't discredit their arguments. It just shows that they're human beings, just like you and me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. In this era of, like, I don't know, what you call it, obscene wealth, not for everybody, but some people seem to have like what we might define as obscene wealth. Have we seen much of the Elons and the Warren Buffetts and the Jeff Bezos? I've seen them buying like stuff like Twitter and buying the Washington Post, but do we see them buying starting any 21st century like universities and new cathedrals and any, that sort of beautiful things for humanity? I'm just wondering.
We do. The most affluent people do disproportionately donate to universities, so they certainly donate to universities. There is a movement to start a new university in Texas that Barry Weiss is associated with, but that's very daunting. But religious colleges and universities, right? There are major donors behind them. Now, you can always find ways to tear down someone. It's like, why didn't they build a cathedral? Like, why didn't they start a university? You can find infinite fault with people. So if the argument is, why don't rich people give to charity? Well, rich people give a huge amount to charity, particularly Americans.
Right.
Americans are a disproportionately charitable giving people.
Right. Well, I don't know what could be different, Luke, because we weren't living in those times. Is when the times when a Mr. Vanderbilt or a Mr. Duke puts a university together. It could have been that the brick and mortar for such a thing was so much cheaper back then. You get what I'm saying, Luke? It could be that the times, just the things have gotten so much expensive that we see them having hundreds of billions of dollars, and we think it's a shit ton of money, but we see how fast they can spend that much money just pissing around in Ukraine, just building trains to nowhere, that sort of thing. I guess money.
You had fracking billionaires. They funded Prager universities. So if we wanted to start a university, starting one online would make a lot more sense. You wouldn't start publishing a newspaper on paper if you wanted to affect the national conversation, right? You'd start up a news magazine online.
Yeah, and me thinking when America is going to make that slow turn towards, like, I don't know where I think it ought to be or whatever. To me, that's going to be one of the signs when I see somebody like an Elon that is a little bit more of a right-thinking type person building or putting together some mechanism that'll put together a vanguard. And we know it'll take 5 years. We know it'll take 10 years, but just something to counteract the hamburger meat that's coming out of the colleges right now, today,
Well, Peter Thiel does this. He funds people to drop out of college. He funds intellectuals. He's doing many of the things you talk about. So like a lot of smart people receive financial support and guidance from Peter Thiel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was just thinking about, Western culture in general, seems to be sort of like a celebration and a commodification of the 7 deadly sins, and from porn, Disney, childlessness. I've written down a couple of things here: anti-traditional, consumerism, anti-spirituality, basically diversity run amok, tribalistic. How attractive of that is an export? There was a time where the whole world wanted what America was exporting. You know what I'm saying, Luke? Do you think now in 2025 that's still the case?
Yeah, America is even stronger than it was economically and culturally 2 decades ago. So you sent me a recent email. What was it about the 50s and 60s that mesmerizes Kip? and it's a question no one's asked, but you're responding to my critique that you seem to only venerate the past and crap on the present. But yeah, in 1960, America had about 40% of global GDP versus about 24 now. Well, 10 years ago, it had about 20% of global GDP. So we have a higher percentage of GDP now than we did 10 years ago. America is disproportionately becoming more powerful in the world. It's on a trajectory of increased power vis-a-vis its main rivals when compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago. Most of the world's great universities are in the United States. The future is largely created in San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York City. So we are the world's dominant economic power, and we spend as much on the military as every other country put together. And we're also the world's dominant cultural power. So you go to Australia or you go to France or Germany, and much of the news will be about what's going on in the United States. So vis-a-vis other countries in the real world, America's only growing more powerful, not less.
For the record, my thinking changes on a dime. What did I put it down to on the 50s and 60s that night? That night, what did I pin it down to?
Okay, let me pull it up again. Okay, so what it was is you're answering a question that no one asked, but let's go with it. What was it about the 50s and 60s that mesmerizes Kip? So after World War II, America was particularly dominant. So in 1950, America probably manufactured a majority of all manufactured goods in the world. In 1960, America was still 40% of global GDP. And our economy, he says, meshed well with the full spectrum of IQs that one sees on the bell curve, and that this has not been as true since the 1970s. Right, so there were far more manufacturing jobs prior to the 1970s. The concept of the company man died around 1985. Now, I think the concept of the company man died around 1975. So until the 1970s, it seemed like a large number of Americans, if not a majority of American workers, wanted to work for one big company their entire life. But that possibility pretty much died out in the 1970s. And so nowadays, all the talk is about starting your own company, and that's the thing to do. But that's not the American tradition. It's not like Americans were just always out there starting their own companies. Most Americans wanted to work for one big company their entire life, reap all the benefits such as pension, etc. But since the economic dislocations of the 1970s, it's become glorified to start your own business, which I see in my empirical day-to-day existence. 9 out of 10 people are not well suited for making their primary income from their own business. So way too many people think that they can make a living from their own business because they lack the discipline to be a good employee for someone else. And so they imagine that they can go off on their own. And if you lack the discipline to be a good employee for someone else, you're not going to likely have the discipline to create a good business for yourself. Now, you further wrote, neither workers or management even pretend to care now. Well, we have less in common with our fellow Americans. Yeah. We have more diversity, less social cohesion, social trust. So it is more I'm in it for number one mentality across the board. Correct. HR departments are more powerful because civil rights has intruded by making more and more of our intimate decisions subject to litigation. And HR departments do not exist to protect the worker. They exist to protect the company. And so in a more litigious and diverse society, and more volatile economy, there is much less loyalty between companies and workers. And you conclude, how do we restore the ways that made company men? The employees who shared the owner's vision to flourish through good work at a fair price. Stop immigration. Let's begin with that. Roll back civil rights legislation. Roll back incentives to sue each other. But let's start there. That's my beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think you're right when you said that company. What happened in the 70s, Luke, was the pension started to going away, and I probably would say in 85, 84, 86 was the time when the workers fully understood that. They fully understood that there was no parachute for them anymore. And that also began when the HR departments, you could see the moment they got in there, all they cared about was the owner's liability, both from a financial end or both from an insurance liability end. So, yeah, it's unfortunate because when we talk about that, Luke, people probably can't even fathom what being a company man was, but it was an attitude that you didn't need the manager looking over your shoulder because you gave a damn what that rivet looked like yourself because it had the company logo, somewhere on the project or whatever. And just that concept, it probably sounds foreign to young people today, but you absolutely know it was true at one time, right, Luke?
Right. And also, not everyone's suited for being a company man. I am not well suited for it. Just the bigger the company to provide all those benefits, you have to have a ton of laws and to allow relatively little discretion. And so that type of work arrangement drives me insane.
And one thing I'll tell you, maybe this is the mystic in me. The mystic in me can't help but notice that we did all these great things right up to the time where we started working with transistors in the 1940s, and everything from probably cell phones to the man in the moon directly came off of that. But when we started blowing those atomic bombs up, I haven't seen I don't know. I haven't seen the same level of advances since. It's almost like as if maybe the universe maybe doesn't view us as a force for evil, but no longer views us as a force for good, after a certain point. But I don't know. That's just, that's just one man's thinking there. But I was going to say, what Christ said about Babylon. He said, "Come out of her, my people." So the holy man is really incompatible with the modern West, and just like Babylon, maybe it's just my hope for the inability to reintegrate, into the world, for the past 18 years. You get what I'm saying? Some of this, Luke, could just be my cope. Does that make sense, Luke?
Yeah, I believe it is your cope, but not your cope, everyone's cope, right? I am predisposed to seeing the world outside is a wonderful place, that there's just so much beauty and possibility, because I have a predisposition and a bias and a filter towards enhancing my own happiness. And so I don't encounter the world as it is. I encounter the world with this positivity bias that I want to find more and more reasons for why life is wonderful. So I have a particular bias. Everyone's going to try to justify their own standing and look for reasons for why life has disappointed them by placing the blame outside of themselves, rather than saying, oh, maybe I'm making some choices that have curtailed the possibilities in my life.
You remember that flick, Life is Wonderful? Wasn't that one of those flicks? I can't remember if it was black and white or maybe
It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life, about the banker who imagined what would happen if he never lived.
No, this was more Life is Wonderful. I'm thinking it was about a guy who's having to go through the Holocaust with his son or something.
Oh yeah. I saw that, and so he tried to take care of his little boy in a concentration camp.
Yeah. Best I can remember, he was making it all like it was a big comedy act or whatever.
Yes.
So, but the subtitles, it's hard for me. I'm trying, watch the screen. Now watch down to the bottom of the screen. Now watch the whole screen. Now watch the bottom of the screen. I don't like them. Are you able to get through with the subtitles, or do you find them difficult as well?
No, I like, I'm fine with subtitles. One of my favorite movies is in Italian cinema, Paradiso.
To close with tonight, do you remember the 70s show in the morning called Let's Make a Deal with that guy Monty Hall?
Yes.
You do remember that?
Yeah, I never watched it, but I just remember it.
You remember, well, he liked to give away a car, and what he would have have like a behind door number 1, door number 2, and door number 3, and there would be basically 2 goats and a car, and he would do it the same way. I'm getting ready to pose it to you. What he would do, he would ask you, Luke, to pick a door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. So of those 3, which you got a favorite number? Are you superstitious? You got a favorite number between those 3?
1 is the loneliest number, so let's go with 1.
Okay, yeah, okay. So what he would do then is he would show you a goat behind door number 2 or number 3. And then he would say, let's just say he showed you a goat behind 3. He would ask you, do you want to stay where you're at with lucky number 1, or do you want to move to door number 2? And I said all that just to ask you, should you move to door number 2, or should you stick with your initial hunch? What's your 40 gut feeling telling you on that?
I don't have anything for you. I'm sorry. Like, I want to make the best of reality, and I also want America to change. So,
well, let's. I can. Let's see, to try to sort this out. If we could play it in our mind 100 times over, and 40 always picks number 1, right? Because 1 is the loneliest number.
Yes.
So mathematically, you should get like 33.3% chance, right, Luke Ford?
Yes.
So no matter what happens, he's gonna show you door number 2 or door number 3. He's gonna show you one of those goats and then ask you if you want to move over. So guess what's happening there? He's showing you one door, and then he's asking you if you want the other door. So basically, he's exposing 2, or you could be hard-headed and stay on the one you initially chose. So technically, Luke, even if you wore your rabbit's foot, maybe you would be right 35, 36, 37% of the time. But that means you should always take the offer. As soon as he offers you, do you want the other one? It doesn't, it seems to be, it flies in the face of what you think will be logic. But as soon as you play it in your mind, like 10 times over or 100 times over, you're realizing that little trick he's doing you by showing you a goat and asking you want to move over to the other. He's giving you a chance to take 2/3. Your choice goes to 2/3 instead of 1/3. Anyway, I've taken too much of your time. Back to the fun.
Thanks,
for
pal.
All right,
Take care,
bye-bye.
man. Bye. Okay, American Primeval. A couple of highlights from episode 2. This is Brigham Young. He's the governor of Utah. He's one of the founders of the Mormon faith, and here he is preaching.
Drinks down water, but an ignorant prejudice causes them to refuse, to persecute, to threaten us with war. But we cannot break it. We hear brethren talk of coming to Utah to enjoy the blessings of this land. What? We can make it if we stay true to each other, true to our beliefs, and true to the church. So, during this time of our Reformation, when evil wants to pull us away from what brought us here, we must use...
So Brigham Young will combine the most soaring and transcendent religious rhetoric with just bloodthirsty, realistic actions, but will try to ensure that they don't rebound back on his church. But he will countenance massacres, right, of settlers moving through Utah to try to protect his own group.
The spirit of Zion to push that evil away. Push that evil away. For not today, brothers, not tomorrow, but someday in the future, our territory and this entire American continent will be Zion. Amen.
Amen.
So good. Okay, another little highlight from American Primeval, episode 2. Hope there's a second season. I don't know if there's going to be a second season. I think it's just, is it 6 episodes? Yeah, 6 episodes. The whites will not go away. So this is one renegade group of Indians who participated in the massacre and taken these white women hostage. And they're talking to a different group of Indians who have a different attitude towards white people. So the group 1, they wanted to reach accommodations with white people, and then the other group of Indians just wants to slaughter them.
Close your eyes, put yourself somewhere else.
Leave me, she's son! Right? So one group argues, look, there are too many white people. It's useless to fight them. We should just make alliances with them.
Dama,
to survive. And the hardcore Indians slaughter the assimilated, compromising Indians. So there are some strength advantages that come with being particularly hardcore, right? It's strengthening.
Mr. Pratt, we got
And one Mormon settler who was a minority Mormon with the group of non-Mormon settlers that were dominantly slaughtered. They thought that by keeping some Mormons with them, that would act as a protection against the Mormon militias, but it didn't work out. So this guy survives getting scalped. Now he's being interrogated. Who carried out this massacre?
Here in these parts.
Then I'll form one myself.
With what shine to convince others to join up? Everything you had has been took.
So he has a beautiful wife, and he's desperate to find her.
Through the glory of God, I'll call on their sense of decency.
Son, Jesus Christ himself could not gather a handful of these men to track down his own sweet virgin mama. Do not fool yourself into thinking otherwise.
Mr. Bridger doesn't share our faith in the goodwill of others, Brother Pratt. I understand what it means.
Right, and so this church official who's speaking these pious words, he organized the Mormon militia massacre that resulted in our Mormon brother here getting scalped.
He needs to be a member of our faith. You're one of us. There'll be more than a few men willing to join in retrieving your wife.
So it's beautiful to be part of an in-group because people make sacrifices for each other that they will not do for strangers and members of out-groups.
God bless. Good luck to you both. The woman and boy that joined you, Rollo?
Same fate as the rest.
We checked for survivors. It was dark. My men and I stayed.
Right, if there are any survivors for this Mormon massacre, all right, that's going to rebound very badly back on Mormons. So the Mormon marauders were given very strict instructions. No survivors.
Any longer, we risk being seen.
A lot of loose ends, Woolsey. Pratt out there, his wife, possibly others. He'd be telling his story.
Right, if you're going to commit acts of evil, you don't want to leave loose ends.
Where are those soldiers at Bridges right now? In Washington here, we'd have 1,000 troops headed our way.
No loose ends. I will execute him tonight.
Not unless he suspects something. Tell them Pratt's still one of us. And
right? He's one of us until he becomes inconvenient. And that's how the world works. You may think that you're a valued member of your in-group. You may think that you're a valued employee. You may see that you are just producing at such a high level for your employer. But once you become a liability, either for your in-group or your employer, boom, then off with your head.
We're all with God together in this war. You understand?
Yes, sir.
So not necessarily a correlation between pious rhetoric that people give to you and pious behavior that they give to you, right? The same people who will speak to you piously about how much they love you and God loves you will cut off your head if you become inconvenient.
I'll return to Governor Young in the morning. Let him know everything's being handled.
Everything being handled, meaning got to kill all the loose ends.
Tomorrow maybe we'll have better news than the news that we
Whoops.
Go anymore. I like a company that gives up on DEI. I don't like a company that fights for DEI. I'm going to vote with my feet in my memberships. And I expect you to do the same, Noah.
Not a big fan of Costco continuing on with DEI.
In particular, Lena Khan and her crusade against Silicon Valley enterprises.
That's the Federal Trade Commission. That's the Lena Khan,
right, the losingest loser in this role, who nevertheless had all the right, ideas and all her sympathies.
All the right ideas based for the left. Yeah,
speaks to me about a government that has far too much influence over private enterprise, private affairs, and these individuals know it.
Right. You may be annoyed that the government has too much influence over private business, but that's the way the world works. Do you want private businesses such as Facebook, right, bending the knee to you, or do you want them bending the knee to your political opponents?
And they know where their bread is buttered, and they're cozying up to this administration in order to save their own bacons. Now, you can say, well, that's great, but you also have to admit to yourself that's temporary, because Democrats will not be out of power forever. I want a culture that is responsive to the culture.
Yeah, whatever you want. Doesn't matter if it doesn't match reality. And temporary, yes. Everything is temporary. Our lives here on this earth are temporary.
Culture. I don't want a culture that is reflective of whatever the political makeup of Washington is at any given
John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we will all be dead.
moment.
Look, you're right. However, it's long past time that we are Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman and Silicon Valley is Larry Miller sucking up to her in the store. As Richard Gere says, we need more sucking up, after he insulted her when she came in to buy a dress for the big party. Like, if they are suck-ups, if Zuckerberg is going to suck up to the Democrats and change all policies at Meta, or as it was then called Facebook, to give them succor and have them be nice to him and do whatever. And then he says 6 years later, ooh, boy, did I make a mistake. First of all, this wasn't good for me. Second of all, it really wasn't good for me with this guy who was so transactional. And you know what? I'm going to go on Joe Rogan and I'm going to talk to Ben Shapiro and I'm going to throw a party with Miriam Adelson at the inauguration and all of that. What's all that about? That's like, okay, so let me enjoy a little sucking up. We can enjoy the fact that they're sucking up to us a little bit. You're right that they are conscienceless, sociopathic, doing this entirely transactionally, but superficially, can we not just enjoy it a little bit?
What am I if not the wet blanket? This is my role.
That's true. Okay.
Well,
anybody else want? Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think Noah's point is interesting because it's not just that they are conscienceless. There's the problem that the line between mammoth industry, or particularly the digital world and Silicon Valley, the line between that and government has become very, very blurry on both sides. When you have the Biden administration hoping or trying to work hand in glove with, and in some cases succeeding with online platforms to withhold information from the public, and then you have on the other side Elon and the first buddy of Donald Trump, trying to and hoping to dictate policy about bills. This is not on a much larger level. This is very, very bad.
There's no question that it's bad. There's no question that we're.
Okay, let's see what Mark Halperin is
voting
talking about.
to confirm her. And in
join
fact,
him.
Adam
let's
Schiff
join him live.
visiting together is giving his farewell address, and he's almost certainly going to be part of the conversation. Love for you to do that. If you're watching on YouTube or on the chat, but I'm told it's less smacky, loving, which is extraordinary because I'm a little bit different here. Conversations to educate, to get people to think, to expose his farewell address, and he's almost certainly going to talk more. He already talked earlier today about the deal. It's a fascinating story of this transition. Most important is whether the deal holds and whether the hostages come out, and how the second stage it's enacted. As you know, the deal involves release of hostages maybe this Sunday. There's some question about whether the Israelis will approve the deal, but most political and diplomatic analysts suspect that they will. So phase one seems like it's going to in effect. There will be hostages, including a couple of Americans released. And then we'll see what happens. Some of the thornier issues, even the parties acknowledge, have not fully been worked out. And that includes the question of what happens on the ground in Gaza. If there is a ceasefire, aid is supposed to go in. There's supposed to be some sort of peacekeeping. There's supposed to be some sort of new government there. All of that has been a huge part of the stumbling block of getting to the deal. And of course, implementation of phase 2 will fall solely, from the United States perspective, not on the Biden administration, but on the Trump administration. Part of why this deal is so fascinating from an American domestic political perspective is because it really did require both the current administration and the incoming administration to get it done. The metaphor that I've been using is a jar of pickles that you can't get open. And one guy, Joe Biden, has been trying to get the lid off the pickle jar for a long time, and he can't quite get it off. It's still stuck on there. And then the other guy comes in and opens it right up. Joe Biden says he never would have been able to open that jar if I hadn't loosened the lid. And Donald Trump says, I did it. So on one level, extraordinary cooperation. I wouldn't say unprecedented, but pretty close to it, with negotiators for both Biden and Trump in Doha, finishing up this deal, working side by side, giving each other credit. And you'll see in a moment, some people in the administration are giving Donald Trump credit. Donald Trump on Truth Social basically taking all the credit, no surprise there. And there's an argument on his side, which is Joe Biden had a long time to try to get this deal in place and couldn't get it over the finish line. Donald Trump demanded it be done. And I think there's no doubt that Donald Trump has an argument to make on that. On the other hand, there was a deal that was teed up by Joe Biden and his team. So I think it's a great story of cooperation. And they've cooperated. I've reported previously they're cooperating on Iran, what to do about Iran at this point, both because Iran is weaker than it's been, and therefore the U.S. and Israel have an opportunity to strike at Iran, and the development of Iran's nuclear program. That's another area of cooperation. There may be others that we don't know about. I've been probing on that. But in this case, the level of cooperation has not been absolute, at least rhetorically. As I said, President Trump on Truth Social taking, I would say, all the credit, close to all the credit for getting the deal in place. Joe Biden, State Department official, today gave some credit to Donald Trump. Please, roll 7.
When it comes to the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line. And it's been critical because, obviously, as I stand here today, this administration's term in office will expire in 5 days. And one of the things that we have always said about this deal is that when you get from stage 1 to stage 2, that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar are the guarantors of this deal. And Egypt and Qatar will push Hamas to stay at the bargaining table and to get from stage 1 to stage 2, and the United States will push Israel to stay at the bargaining table to get from phase 1 and phase 2. So obviously those are promises we cannot make on behalf of the United States for any longer than the next 5 days. And so it's critical that all of the parties to the agreement and the other mediators see that when the United States is in the room making commitments, those are lasting commitments that extend beyond this administration into the next one. I would just say, lastly, I don't know if it's unprecedented to have envoys from an outgoing and an incoming administration sitting at the same table negotiating a ceasefire agreement of this kind. But if it's not unprecedented, it's certainly unusual. And we, of course, thank the Trump team for working with this on this ceasefire agreement. We think it's important that they were at the table. And
So that's Matt Miller. He's now the State Department spokesman, previously Justice Department spokesman in the Obama years. Incredibly smart guy and very politically savvy. And you saw him there on a couple of occasions in that soundbite giving credit to Donald Trump, unambiguous. And so you might say there's despite the political differences between the two camps, there's been extraordinary effort made in that instance to give credit. However, Matt Miller's boss, President Biden, spoke at the White House about the deal, and then got asked about the core, political question, gossipy question. Who deserves the credit? Is it Joe Biden or Donald Trump? Let's roll that, please. Number 6.
What's credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Less credit there, right? There was ways to handle that besides sarcasm and indignity. So we'll see. We'll see what he says tonight. And there's obviously lots of reporting that you'll see in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and elsewhere in the coming days as to how this all exactly happened. But I think it's, again, fair to say it would not have happened without the two presidents. Fair to say that if not for Donald Trump, it would not have gotten over the finish line. We shall see. All right. On Capitol Hill, we could spend an hour on each of the 6 hearings. I've been lobbied all day by different people to emphasize different parts of the hearing, some from a journalistic point of view, some from a partisan point of view. But I think the Rubio hearing for Secretary of State is most interesting for how supportive many of the Democrats on the committee were and are of Senator Rubio, their colleague, but also his growth as a national figure since he entered the Senate, I think, has been quite striking. Presidential campaign, helped in some ways, although diminished his reputation, as often happens when people run for president and don't do particularly well. But there's genuine appreciation amongst the senators of both parties for having one of their own as Secretary of State and having someone whose worldview on some of the thornier questions kind of sits astride both, or straddles, I should say, both the MAGA America First point of view as well as more traditional Republican orthodoxy on some of these issues. So that hearing was close to a love fest. The one that has gotten the most attention is Pam Bondi for Attorney General. I'm going to show you some clips from that, but I'll tell you what I heard from Democrats all day, very similar to what I heard yesterday from Democrats regarding the Democratic senator's performance in the Pete Hegseth hearing, which is Democrats appear to be largely fighting an old war, the previous war, using the same tactics and strategy they used to fight it, which is to say they're raising issues that they tried to raise against Donald Trump in the context of the 2024 campaign, and they weren't enough to beat him. Pam Bondi is, and all the nominees today came in, like Hegseth, very well prepared, determined to have a combination of accommodation and deference to the Senate, but when challenged, we're ready to push back. So the main interlocutor for Pam Bondi, who produced a lot of attention, is Adam Schiff, the new senator from California, and who, as you know, for MAGA is one of the most detested Democrats from his time in the House. And Adam Schiff today, I would say, did nothing to endear himself to the good people of Mar-a-Lago in his colloquies with Pam Bondi, the nominee for Attorney General. I could show you 10 bites from this thing, but let's look at him asking about whether there be an investigation of Jack Smith, the special counsel #1, please.
The president has said Jack Smith should go to jail. Will you investigate Jack Smith?
Senator, I haven't seen the file. I haven't seen the investigation. I haven't looked at anything. It would be irresponsible of me to make a commitment regarding anything without, you're a long practicing attorney, without looking at a file.
So you would need a factual predicate to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
Not a summary by you sitting here. Yes, sir.
And not a summary by the president either, right?
Absolutely.
So a summary by the president or his desire to investigate Jack Smith would not be enough for you to open an investigation of Jack Smith, is that right?
I will look at the facts and evidence in any case. You know,
and sitting here today,
Senator, 72% of Americans
I only have
have
7
lost
minutes.
faith in the Department of Justice.
Sitting here today, are you aware of any factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Sitting here today, yes or no?
Senator, I will look at the facts and the circumstances.
You can't answer that question.
Brought to me.
You're not a part of the department yet. There's no worry about divulging law enforcement sensitive information. So just tell us, are you aware? Just tell us, are you aware of a factual predicate to investigate Jack Smith? Yes or no?
Senator, what I'm hearing on the news is
horrible. Are you aware of a?
Do I know if he committed a crime? I have not.
You seem reluctant to answer a simple question. Let me ask you a different simple question.
Eek. All right. Here's more simple questions from Adam Schiff. #2, please.
Asking you, sitting here today, whether you are aware of a factual predicate to investigate Liz Cheney.
Senator, no one has asked me to investigate Liz Cheney. That is a hypothetical.
The president has called for it publicly. You are aware of that, aren't you?
No one has asked me to investigate.
But the president
Liz.
has
We're
called,
also worried about Liz Cheney,
the
Senator.
president has
you know what
called
we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
the
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You
is
are
through
aware,
the roof.
Ms. Bondi,
Your robberies are 87% higher than the national
My question
average.
is this.
That's what I
My
want to
question
be
is
focused
this.
on, Senator.
Do you have the
if
power
I'm
to say
as
no to the
Attorney
president?
General.
Ooh, okay. Again, argumentative and bantering, or not bantering, but jousting. But these are not issues that a lot of Democrats said to me today. Like, what is in it for us? This line of questioning is not going to, as Dan Tarentine pointed out this morning, that line of questioning is not going to keep Republicans from voting to confirm her. And in fact, Adam Schiff doing stuff like that's probably make Republicans rally around her even more. And the American people it's just not an issue that most people would care about. So it's a little bit confusing what the strategy there is. Now, the one Democrat on the Judiciary Committee who I heard from several people they thought did quite well, acquitted herself quite well, was Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Let's look at a little of that. Number 4, please.
Yet you have a nominee from this incoming administration, Kash Patel, the pick to head the FBI, have serious concerns about him, has referred to the FBI's Intel Division, which is responsible for protecting us from foreign adversaries like China, as, quote, the biggest problem the FBI has had, and he said that he wants to, quote, break that component out of the FBI. Do you agree?
I have not seen those comments from Mr. Patel. I would review them, but we have to do everything we can to protect our country. Again, Mr. Patel would fall under me and the Department of Justice, and I will ensure that all laws are followed, and so will he.
Okay. There are many decisions made by the FBI director, having seen a number of them do their work, that can be made. While I agree you would be the boss of Kash Patel, I'm not sure that you would be able to intervene with every decision or position that he had or know what he's doing. So let's continue.
All right. So again, that's good oversight, right? That's part of what this is about, is to put down the record of what kind of job she would do in that. And we've seen in recent years, particularly with Jim Comey in the Obama administration, we've seen FBI directors make decisions. Comey made a very high profile one in the investigation Hillary Clinton, without checking with the head of the Justice Department, with the Attorney General. So I'm glad that she's asking about that, because I don't want there to be ambiguity about the relationship between the head of the FBI and the Attorney General. 4 more confirmation here.
So Pam Bondi is 59, and she looks great. And I think it's a wonderful quality that she puts, I assume, some effort into her appearance. And women usually look better when they age and they dye their hair. So I assume she's dyed her hair blonde rather than just letting it go gray. Now, some women look better letting it go gray, but I think it's a beautiful quality when men work hard, work diligently, work in an upstanding and ethical manner to take care of their family, and when women look after their family and look after themselves and do everything that they can to look great for their partner.
Hearings, again, nothing in them that I'll spend time showing you, but all the nominations appear to be on track. And again, as we talked about this morning with Team Hegseth, seems like they're pretty well organized there, that they have a good sense of how to build a team, how to prepare the nominee, how to coordinate with the Republican senators on the questioning. I want to hold off on a couple topics, and again, I'm waiting for a little bit of news. We'll see if we get it. But while we do, I'll remind you, if you're here on the two-way platform, you want to get into the conversation.
Okay, let's wrap up for today.
Regina Caeli, letare alleluia, letare alleluia, via veneruis immortale, alleluia, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixi, alleluia.
All right, this is a Roman Catholic family, I believe, in the Pacific Palisades, whose home burned down. But even in all their suffering, they still